Borderlands is a lot of things. An all-time bestseller, a gaming icon, a movie, apparently. But the real story starts with its devs, Gearbox Software, and their origins. You'd expect Borderlands to come out of some big-budget gaming institution, a Western Capcom, and yet, Gearbox got its start in the industry developing Half-Life DLCs and porting the game to consoles. It's the story of a plucky pack of nobodies, some regular Joes, rocketing into fame and fortune, but not entirely overnight. Half-Life DLCs and other early projects gave the team experience that was eventually poured into the Brothers in Arms series, a cinematic, tactical World War II shooter that launched on non-Nintendo platforms in 2005 and spun into a whole franchise with a documentary, comic books, and action figures. Brothers in Arms, rated M. For 7. They weren't all well received, but there's a certain ethos, an artistic austerity to the games, narratively and tactically, that paint a picture of a dev team trying very hard to make video games cinema. And then Borderlands happened.
Well, we're here. Don't worry about saying goodbye. I'm sure we'll be doing this all again soon enough.
Borderlands was a monumental success, the first true Gearbox win. Yeah, Brothers in Arms was a runaway hit, and it was the studio's first independently owned title, but Borderlands was almost entirely original. But hold up, this isn't the Borderlands that hit the press months earlier. Yeah, look at that. Real Xbox 360 OG swag. The original Borderlands concept was effectively identical to the final product, except for its aesthetics. The version the world knows, the bright, simplistic, heavily outlined Borderlands, was originally a lower-key, Mad Max-esque sci-fi shooter that probably would have looked downright amateur, standing next to other console titans. It screamed B-game. The popular shooters, the really popular shooters, stood out. Halo, with its brightly colored alien tech that made it look video gamey, but contrasted with harsh military aesthetics and absolutely biblical naming conventions. The Covenant, the Ark, what's next? Master Chief is Jesus? Why did I Google that? Call of Duty was already a long-standing franchise and the title holder for most popular realism shooter, eventually entirely eclipsing Brothers in Arms, maybe due to its impressive online multiplayer, relatively simplistic play, or the incredible budget. Borderlands had to distinguish itself, and it would, mechanically, but as an original IP, it needed flair. Hence, Randy, you're gonna give me a brain bleed. The series blew itself onto store shelves like viscera straight from its creator's brains, except for all of the alleged visual plagiarism. It's pretty well known that Borderlands' style changed before launch, but less widely reported that its aesthetic turned out uncannily similar to a short film called Code Hunters. The visuals, concepts, and even camera work for a couple shots of the intro are close enough that it raised eyebrows across the internet, but ultimately, small filmmakers don't have the money to litigate bigger companies internationally, so Borderlands is legally distinct for all intents and purposes. It's the kind of thing that sucks to learn about looking back, but Borderlands went on to refine and grow into itself over the years, like a rainbow-blasted tumor. Ooh, Borderlands, I've been waiting for this one! Strip the flesh! Self-balloon! Oh yeah, heads up, I'm on the remastered PC version, which has a lag co-op issue and needs a patch. It's toothpicks and glue all the way down. Borderlands is peak gaming nostalgia, at least for me and 5 million other kids. See, while all the other teenagers circa 2009 were getting high, drinking underage, and tossing cherry bombs into public porta potties, I was busy working 35-ish hours a week after school at the local coffee chain to make money for post-secondary education. See, parents, you can have a good kid and they can still wind up talking about video games for a living. But all those hours worked meant I had money and 2 nights a week to chill. Borderlands launched at that perfect, overly strapped time in my life where every second gaming was a blessing. October 2009 to be specific, and I took the few hours I had to slowly churn through the admittedly short runtime, loving every second. A 17-year-old mediocre white guy in his Borderlands. Iconic as 17-year-old mediocre white guy in his South Park. And until this year, 2024, it was the last Borderlands game I ever finished. But enough about me. Like most of the series I've covered, Monster Hunter, Ninja Gaiden, explaining the the basic experience explains the series. It's a simple game. You take jobs, shoot things, loot things, move in, move on, and power up. Occasionally you drive a vehicle. I know. This is difficult stuff. Borderlands was a visually bold, irreverent, Mad Max sci-fi schluter in a time where all of it was novel, at least on home console. 7th-gen games were tapping into advancing technology and striving for grit, photorealism, a mature look to contrast the bright and varied 6th generation, gaming grown up. Borderlands was grown up too, but in a way that appealed to the aforementioned suburban folk.
Oh my god.
Deranged maniacs screaming about meat bicycles, lol, random comedy, an enemy type labeled midgets. Randy, I am gonna pop you like a grape. It came packing plenty of humor to remind players that games were still about fun. Hey, you ain't gotta take things so seriously, man. Look, we put a guy blowing his brains out on the front cover. It's funny, cause like, what if somebody did? Wow. Randy, I am gonna pop you like a grape. When I say irreverent, I mean, the box art says it all. Not everyone can handle my dark, twisted sense of humor. A mere glance into the depths of my warped mind would cause most to simply go insane. Borderlands spoke to a generation of young people by looking nothing short of punk. It sat alongside the Call of Duty sweatlords and perennial Halo lobby lizards. Hey man, wanna run Legendary tonight? We're on the Covenant mission and we've got to infiltrate the Citadel to kill the Prophet of Truth, then rescue Cortana on high charity. Sorry man, I was shooting midgets. What's up? So, next to looking punk, Borderlands was also incredibly generous, allowing players to step into one of 4 characters' shoes. The Vault Hunters, Brick, Roland, Lilith, and Mordecai. They all shoot guns about the same, give or take some passive traits you can sink points into, but each come packing a unique ability that effectively warps your game plan. Playstyle is a bit of a buzzword now, but in 2008, choice counted for a lot, like getting to pick the only good team in Sonic Heroes or your weapon in Soul Calibur, and choosing a shooter pro tag in a market packed with John Green Guy and John Smith? Brother, I'm about to get M-preg. Generosity's an interesting lens for looking at Borderlands. The real selling point they propped up in ad campaigns was the infamous 87 bazillion guns, which was never true. It's closer to 15 million if you account for every randomized combination of parts. But it sold players a dream, finding something incredible and creating a unique character, finding themselves in the Borderlands. That's a powerful promise from a studio and shows exactly how keyed into the market Gearbox was. Imagine finding something none of your other friends have. And not only that, it can kill them instantly in duels, carry the team in raids. They were playing with fire, but cooking with gas. There really is no other major premise to the original Borderlands game. You're there to find guns and open big-ass treasure chests. But what if there were like a really big chest? The biggest chest of all, the vault! And against all odds, that's how Borderlands is still operating today.
So, you want to hear a story, huh?
No!
Fine. You're dropped off in a dusty backwater and made to run through a series of hoops with everybody's favorite character, Claptrap.
But check me out. Oh, come on, get down.
I'll pay you $87 bazillion to do what the guy on the box is doing. You wander through some basic quests, get your ass bit all over the wasteland, find a few guns, and level up enough to unlock your unique class ability. For a short period of time in the intro of every Borderlands game, your character is not themselves, not fully. Most of the series' playable characters are defined by their unique action, but you're made to earn it by getting through the opening hour. I think it's a brilliant move. You absolutely should walk players through the core controls before spicing things up mechanically, and it ends up making the player feel established, like they've actually accomplished something in this disgusting place. The early game is fairly dry, like a desert, but also exciting in its own way, that you're made to actually scrounge for ammo in scattered containers to keep guns stocked, that you need to really fight to survive in some of these early encounters. By the endgame, digging around, opening random boxes isn't a real consideration. You've always got nearby vending machines to stock up at, and in my playthrough, I found a revolver that regenerated ammo. Most battles were never a problem because with a couple headshots, someone's head was paced, and I was back in the fight. Kill a guy, get back up. I love that. It's a hater mechanic. I'm so full of spite, I'm going to get my bleeding ass up and kill you! The first few hours are characterized by scraping and scrapping through a hostile wasteland, and it's some of the best vibes in the series. Regardless of the later game's triumphs, you can't get this in Borderlands 3. It's almost exclusive to this first entry. It's simplistic to a fault, slipshod in every aspect, but something is there, bubbling under the surface. It's somewhere between the insane guns and the almost anime character designs with their bloated heads and misshapen bodies, at least looking at Lilith. And that's powerful. The game reeks of its own possibilities, like if you squint through the dust clouds and sift through the grit, you'll find something incredible. Midgetville. Y'all done called that place Midgetville. Like, what's next? Cripple Camp? Is that why the sign is so high, Randy? So they can't change it? Dry wastes, pockmarked with craters and saddled with industrial wreckage, litter Pandora's surface. Water is scarce, the sun beats down, and folks are mean or crazy. Usually both. It's a world sucked dry and beaten into submission time and again by warring weapons manufacturers, a series of corporations so influential they sell all tech on the planet, enough that it's distributed via vending machines. It's a setting profoundly steeped in a parody of capital, but the game's stories shift the focus away from that sort of biting critique and use it as a backdrop, a stage for more flashy and marketable things to happen. It's not some New World ideology nonsense like some Borderlands boomers feel the later games and even the modern games are. Anti-corporate messaging is visible in plenty of early shooters, like Red Faction and Half-Life. Shooters were cool when shooters were punk, when they weren't recruiting for the United States Imperial Project. There's an austere beauty to Pandora's Wilderness, allegedly lifted as it is from Code Hunters, Mad Max, any number of influences really, because it's those aesthetics spun in the video game medium for a modern audience. The patches of color are places you can explore, visually congruent with the mechanical promise of loot. There's gold in them thar hills. It's a deeply Western production, from its tall tale, Wild West mysticism, giant racks, the skag that was this big, all the way to its garish Americana, traced in propaganda posters and bolted to billboards, vending machines distributing guns. It's a world of wealth that collapsed under mountains of gold rushes, and the few remaining citizens, the ones that are sane, cling to a desperate day-to-day existence. These aren't people with dreams or vision, but a wealth of material needs. You might think that'd make Borderlands somber, but the devs went for humor instead. It's easy to feel down when life is shit, but laughing in its face, I think, is what sells Borderlands. The absurd embarrassment of it all. Thousands of years of human evolution for this? After polite society and all of its decorum withers away, why bother with social platitudes, expectations? What's left is a world of incredibly callous, bloodthirsty, horny, and cruel waste cases laughing it up at the end of the world. And I love that. I think it's the only way to inject life into a setting this grim. That's why the world is packed with midgets. Not because the devs had strong lore reasons for their inclusion, but because Gearbox realized it was one of the only minorities they could pop up on stage and effectively punch down on. Now, Borderlands is not without its cringe. In establishing this setting with measured prose, fit to move Wordsworth himself, I've ignored Claptrap. Part of Borderlands' appeal is its silliness. Fans may have turned on Claptrap over the years, but his initial appearance was genuinely surprising, if only for a single game. Look, it's a robot! He's dancing! He's dancing, y'all! And that helped define the series, being deliberately wacky, for fun. NPCs are insane and they say insane things. Quest NPCs are murderers and somehow sympathetic allies. People are pernicious and cruel, but what's more insane is that nobody really ever tries to double-cross you, either because you're powerful and not worth bothering, or because there's a genuine kind streak in the games that I think is easy to overlook. It isn't exactly Mad Max. Every character may have a price, but they're all very consistently helpful and even personable. Again, Borderlands was punk for tapping into the things people can't get enough of in Western art: pain, misery, snark, etc., but countervailing that more expected kind of expression with so many friendly faces. What's interesting is the series' tonal shift going forward in relation to this brand of humor and brand of kindness. Playing through the series, you watch insane but kind turn into lol random and badass bacon dubstep. And I genuinely can't tell if I was simply gaslit by the software application in the first game, or it's the result of the internet age brain-rotting the f*** out of the writers. A part of Borderlands' early genius was its playable characters. It may not be the first, but it's definitely the game that popularized the ability shooter concept, a first-person shooter with extras. And that's important. At a time where boomer shooter truthers and competitive players favored the PC for classic appeal and heightened control via mouse and keyboard, the market was still console dominant, meaning that some kind of consideration, a lubricant, had to be applied to make shooters feel better. If you've ever played a first-person shooter on console, you should instantly know what I'm talking about. You've got twin sticks, operated in tandem, for both character placement and aiming. I watched my dad try to play a twin-stick shooter. He could not do it. I've watched non-gamers try to play twin-stick shooters. You ever see that? You ever watch that IRL and suddenly know how hard teachers have it? And so you watch console game devs feature sticky reticles and aim assist and other kinds of mechanical generosity because you can't ask most people to pop heads at 30 paces accurately with twin-stick aiming. At least if your bullets are actually bullet-sized. That's a chunky little chungus. I'm better these days, but even with available options, it's never been a perfect system. There's a comment on my very old BioShock video talking about if you look closely enough, you can see he's using the controller, so clearly he didn't experience the game as it was meant to be played, as though the majority of players weren't console players first. And Borderlands didn't address it outright, it just paved over the challenge by weighing some of a character's power towards their abilities. It's why I spec'd hard into Mordecai's Bloodwing when I first played years ago. If I sucked at aiming, Bloodwing would home in anyway. Roland gets an auto-firing turret, Lilith turns invisible, drops an AoE, and again on exit, Brick turns into a melee character. Ain't gotta aim when I can smell your speed stick, but these are obvious, direct attempts to lessen the requirements to play the game for average console kids. Shooting well is still highly rewarded, critical hits and weak spots make it clear, but anyone can arguably have a better time here than a multiplayer COD lobby, and that counts for something. The characters are still pretty primitive, skill trees or not. Those basic abilities effectively define their play pattern unless they opt, like me, to mostly ignore Bloodwing for more revolver crits. I mean, do the math. All 1.5 seconds of throwing Bloodwing is 1.5 seconds of bullets you didn't put in a guy. Thankfully, character abilities only improved with time. And in that vein of, making the thing playable, Borderlands included a second win feature where being killed actually put you in a fight or die state. And killing someone, anyone, would get you back up. This is arguably the real core of Borderlands because it flavors the entire play experience regardless of the character. Sure, you can't second win forever. The timer gets increasingly small as you continue to die during any given fight, but it rewards aggressive play, turns the entire ranged shooting style of play active, disincentivizing cheese and snipers/grenade spam because hey, you can get up anyway. Just hop in and look cool. It also passively rewards tactical death. That is, if you die behind cover, you're gonna have a hard time shooting someone down. But if you die where you can see everyone and not get instantly downed again, you can stay practically invincible. Borderlands 1 isn't a particularly crufty game. It's not doing anything super interesting mechanically, but we can appreciate a game that's meant for people to play it. So while Borderlands is explicitly about loot, it's not an insane loot fiesta like Diablo 3, which I love to point out, because Borderlands at least looked like it was trying to stay restrained. You'd find treasure chests all over the place, these hulking colored containers with fancy opening animations to get you excited, like Zelda without the cutscene, and every chest was crap. Most of the loot was average, and you needed to push into New Game Plus and extra content as well to really break the game over your knee. Like really, 87 bazillion guns means basically nothing if 86 whatever of them are trash. The best I had way back when, and for 2 full playthroughs by the way, was an Elementless Atlas revolver that regened ammo and crit like a freight train. It was cool, but hardly as magical as the game made itself out to be. Even early on, you find a shotgun that belongs to a named NPC and it looks awesome. This weird, alien, bouncy, wavy energy thing, except it really sucks. Like fascinating levels of suck. All 12 inches of suck! It gives the impression that guns were planned to be more gamey, weirder overall, but they either scrapped it because hot lead works fine, or to keep the game as aesthetically congruent as possible. That's the character of the first game I love so much. So aesthetically pure, so minimalistic. So when you find something amazing, it means something. Obviously, this is why modern Borderlands works. What if jangling keys and flashing lights for all times? What if you ate all 12 donut boxes? Hey y'all, check out our new game genre, JPS. You'll never guess what the J stands for. Borderlands does have a story, but it's not really worth the interrogation. Your party, the ones not on the front of the box, because marketing are searching for a vault. They're vault hunters. This is a career, I guess. People in search of untold riches hidden away in... Okay, this is twee and stupid. Vault hunter, vault hunting, all of this is just... We're contextualizing play with as much branding TM as possible. They're mercenaries who happen to go spelunking. They are murder hobos. They are murder hobos. While most of the actual beats are tepid, it's totally interchangeable with anything else because they're not meaningfully personal. You can pick any of 4 characters after all. What's kind of interesting is the relative non-engagement with the corporate angle. Yes, Hyperion is an antagonistic power, but man, for a game that's actively critical of corporations, it's all shunted into the background as you take down petty tyrants and warlords all across the Borderlands. I reckon if we kill every symptom of the problem, we'll cure the problem, right? Right? Finding pieces of a vault key to eventually secure a fat payday. While the antagonist is corporate, she's spun as predominantly military. Commandant Steele. Oh, that's clever. Was her maiden name Ironbox? She stays off-screen for most of the game, occasionally harassing the player via comms, and is ultimately killed without player input by the enormous tentacle monster the party finds in the vault.
Sergeant, get your team ready to go inside.
Doesn't really spark the imagination. What if a woman got skewered? Yeah, I think I caught that one on Red 2. While bandits are your first enemies, bandits and wildlife, you're upgraded to corporate military forces by the end, and the Iridians. Iridians, or the aliens that guard the vaults, come back in later games but mostly get shunted into the vault specifically. They aren't a major factor, which is wild if you played this in 2008 before the others existed. I mean, what if Metroid dropped the Chozo? Exactly, they'd have to create interesting in-lore explanations for why Samus has to go through morph ball tracks. You first discover them in a wasteland cave, and it's a good moment. Makes you think there's more to discover in the nooks of Pandora. It's the color I was talking about earlier, the promise of Borderlands 1. If you dig around, you'll find something incredible.
Got the door open. You should be
Gonna blow my eyes off. That great hidden treasure out in the wastes is some weird, kind of bad weaponry you can use if you hate yourself. I guess I wasn't expecting that much from the guns that look like sperm. They turn up in droves for the final sprints of the vault, and that's about it for the Iridians. They're a bit of a half-cocked idea, never really coming into their own, but existing as nebulous vault guardians. Thankfully, Borderlands had more stories to tell, and they only get better. Mostly. The DLCs of these games are worth contextualizing. While I'm not necessarily nostalgic for the time period, the rise of the microtransactions specifically, there was a transitory period between no DLC and purchasing points to buy loot crates, and that's where Borderlands 1 sits. Its major DLC packs promised a miniature campaign each, minus Mad Moxie's Underdome Riot, more a combat challenge than anything else, and not for every player by design, but they knew that, so... For shame, Borderlands. For shame! It illustrates the better qualities of downloadable content, that certain parts were disposable, distinctively not for every player, and while there's an obvious argument in whether or not it should have simply been included if it was worthwhile, it's also important to remember that not every dev team was rolling in coins, not all dev cycles can account for the full vision, etc., and historically, in this less soul-sucking atmosphere with optional add-ons, buying DLC carried a kind of go-team mentality. I love this game. I can support it directly. I can buy Randy Pitchford's next trip to medieval times. When players got through something, felt like it was worth the price of admission, and wanted more, knowing full games take years to develop, it's not surprising that those people would choose a game to get more out of it, grease the wheels a bit. I certainly did before I started souring on DLC or any additional kind of content, because regardless of whether it's scummy or not, most games are its mechanics, its offered play experience, so buying more is almost always a safe bet for fans. The DLCs aren't always story relevant. The zombie island of Dr. Ned was fun to revisit, but almost entirely extraneous to the actual Borderlands universe, useful for being a diversion from the wastes of Pandora proper, shaking up the setting, a precursor to the eventual sequel, showing off a corporate town uprooted by disaster a la Red Dead Redemption's own Weird West Zombie Outbreak DLC. Only Borderlands version released first, so I guess Rockstar made a bunch of plagiarism money. Joke, because Borderlands did it first, and again in Borderlands 2 with one of its inbox inserts. So Randy went and saved face by paying the guy privately. Oh, Randy. It's not much of an ambitious adventure. If anything, it's shaders coupled with some new assets to sell a quick zombie pop and romp. This guy is a pumpkin head. But what's interesting is how unwilling the studio was to play with the aesthetic until later games. Most of Borderlands 1 is incredibly safe, visually coherent, and I appreciate that artistically, but it's also a jokey, jaunty mess. The world often fails to visually capture the tone, and this is where the strands started to pull apart. Borderlands, the first game specifically, felt so makeshift, slapped together with tape and a dream. And so many midgets, the amateurish everything, the jank laid so bare, becomes normal until something more bizarre cuts through the white noise, killing Dr. Ned only for him to transform and physically cut through the credits sequence. The sophomoric, holy fucking shit! It's charming in a way that I think publishers, the money people, don't understand, at least if the rest of the series is anything to go by. Not to mention, finding out that Dr. Ned, who's totally not Dr. Zed, the guy you've talked through all throughout the main adventure, is actually a different person. Like, what is that? What am I supposed to do about that? Should I call my lawyer? Should I call my mom? The best remembered DLC is the Secret Armory of General Knox, promising incredible loot, insane bosses, all new enemy types, like this guy from Pikmin. It sold people what they wanted, more Borderlands, for real this time. It's a fiesta, a full-scale series of zones packed with enemies, treasure chests, weird Pandora wildlife, ninja assassins, a new car.
Okay. Okay. It's okay. We did it.
And let's not forget Midgetville, a whole settlement stuffed with midgets. Randy, I want names. The General Knox DLC is pretty peak Borderlands in terms of humor. You know, I love villains who just want to die.
This time I'm really gonna do it. I want to kill myself.
And when you roll up looking to fight, he's a picosecond away from terminating himself with apparently nuclear weapons. Jesus! The guy's been trapped on Pandora, receiving orders from an infant, completely unable to do anything because he's a paramilitary commander for a major corporation stuck in the chain of command and middle management insanity. It's a hilarious concept, the quest to actually give the villain what he wants, killing him, robbing him blind, and piecing. That's Borderlands, man. That quirky, irreverent, disrespectful vibe.
Jazz is really nice. Hey, I'm not into him. No way.
Okay, so it's not all good. The prison sticks out as a fascinating relic, let's call it. I couldn't believe it. It's a punch-down comedy special on gay people, and wow, did it age poorly.
Did you just kill Jerome? God, his pecs were rock hard. Jazz, stop! Oh my god, I'm so ticklish there. Oh, did I hit the transmit button? Oh, crap!
Borderlands is kind of known nowadays by some very well-adjusted people as the game that went woke, and fair enough. You're gonna get those people when you spend time doing your, we're in prison but we're totally not gay. I would never be gay. I would never fantasize about another man's cum. So anyway, I'm really that routine. But to be fair, Randy spent most of his career trying to make amends, so...
Nobody likes the CIA, always spying and running right-wing paramilitary despots. Nobody likes a bigot unless he's crying. Boo-hoo, like a big baby. Boo-hoo, well...
Like, you're not wrong. But it was the way you said it. The Claptrap DLC has, again, some explicitly anti-corporate messaging, but also dangles the wacky interplanetary assassin Claptrap in front of the player for about an hour or two. What's really worth highlighting is the solid bedrock of visuals and narrative angles the series could eventually expand on. Borderlands is a good concept, a game anyone might want to play. The question is, how do you build on a breakout hit?
Send the babies to the meat factory! Strip the flesh! Suck the
So, is that a script change? Why does it just say dubstep 30 times?
Who's ready for another humpin' tea party?
I can't fucking do that! I ended up enjoying my time with Borderlands 2, but that took reevaluating my initial impression. When I first saw Borderlands 2, I couldn't believe it. The jokes were getting Reddit circa 2012.
I'm racking my brain trying to think of a name for that diamond pony I bought. I was gonna call it Piss for Brains in honor of you, but that just feels immature. Hey, maybe Butt Stallion?
I was in creative writing class and couldn't believe this was shamelessly waved in people's faces as the cool new thing. Cynically repackaged internet culture to rope in all the hip young kids. Randy Pitchford isn't hip. Randy's not hip at all. And more than that, I was moving away from loot games. I figured that games were becoming more about sucking up infinite amounts of time to optimize a character instead of being solid on their own. So I turned to fighters straight up, got into Marvel and Street Fighter, specifically because the characters were themselves all there, and if I needed more power, I had to get better myself. I hated that playing looters made my time lived on Earth feel worthless. I would sit for hours just plugging away, and that's not a crime. You get your fun however you want, but because I wanted to make things and wouldn't, opting for numbing safety instead, I started resenting all loot-based gaming. So I'm happy to say the game's successful for a reason, but it's still a significant shakeup. Borderlands 2 is hard to write about. It's the best-selling entry in the franchise. It solidified the series' identity, and it's both an abandonment of establishing values and a refocusing of the vision. Oh look, it's Face McShooty, who you have to shoot in the face. I have a good joke too. How many dead baby jokes does it take? But it's not like the first game was free from sin. The original Borderlands entry had rough edges, and they're pretty inarguable. Enemy design is limp, the guns are significantly more limited than you'd expect, abilities feel supplementary for some characters but omni-important for others, environments are samey, and the story is, well, it is, anyway. And on top of all of that, strong enemies aren't called champions or whatever, but badasses. Real Banff-coated, you feel me? Real hot cat fangs going on up in here! And the sequel improves on all of those things, or at least pumps them full of gamer juice. Enemies with actual mechanics, environments with instantly readable visual identities, more Pandora, more Borderlands! But tone is important, and Borderlands 2, in seeking to improve on its humble origins, makes a very intentional leap.
Do me a favor and lure our guests to the party, or I'll eat your babies.
When she's not doing this, she's usually co-opting African-American vernacular English, like,
That's what she snuggle bites badonkadonk. She's my main squeeze. Lady's got a gut full of dynamite and a booty like, how?
Tina, why do you look like the kind of person who says this stuff and glances around like, are they here? Borderlands 2 is an institution. It's a game so many college kids sunk hours and hours and hours into that it is functionally inextricable from canon. We are stuck with its legacy because it defined a capital F franchise, one that came from nothing. The pits of development work, porting, and adding onto the work of others to stand above the rest. In one way, the stark, glaring abundance, the sheer wubtacular bacondom of Borderlands 2, and especially in contrast to the first game, is the title's strength. It takes the boldness up another 5 notches and proudly, definitively declares that this is Borderlands now, so like it or leave. And fair enough. In another way, the garish everything made me leave a game I liked. Borderlands 2 hit at a period when games were becoming increasingly distilled, very deliberately manufactured for mass appeal. AAA development was about focus testing a concept to perfection. We watch Mass Effect 1's lonely, meandering space quest turn into an action-heavy third-person cover shooter replete with hoorah tone revisions, and while the game is fun, it's doing new things for presumably cynical reasons. You watch The Witcher, evolving entry over entry to better match player expectations, not merely to play better, but to not shunt people expecting a certain ease of access. Borderlands 2 doesn't feel inherently cynical. It's got all its old bones, but it begs a simple question. Exactly how much loot can you make a player sift through? Exactly how long can you trap a player in a Skinner box before they remember they're human? How many references does it take to turn my blood to sodium? Borderlands 2 never pushed microtransactions as boldly as Mass Effect's third game, but still exists as the product of reconsidered design, reshaping the brand identity, maximizing its unique attributes. The result is a title with lasting impact on the series that players incorrectly attribute to later titles going cringe, when the roots sprouted here, the very second the first game hit mass appeal.
And just so you know, my slabs will probably still try to kill you because they're freaking idiots.
Oh, Borderlands. You know, you can reduce a guy to red mist and giblets, but as soon as the swear words come out, no. A part of the shift is explicitly due to the writer's room shakeup. Before, it was 4 dudes including Randy Pitchford, which is why I'm allowed to blame midgets on him. But for 2, they actually decided to pay wage for a trained writer, so Anthony Birch, the man who defined Borderlands conceptually thereafter. Words are power, and people don't give enough credit to that. Words are how we make reality, make sense of our lived experiences, literally codify them into existence. When you say something, it means something.
Climb the pipe to the train, or you'll go insane. What? That's a rap song I wrote.
You really need to chill the out right now, Tina. This is not an indictment of Birch's writing. That's cringy. And for some reason, Gamergate is here now. I just want to highlight that Bro was told to keep things weird and fun, and the tone changes a little because of it. Borderlands 1 had some weirdos.
Nice hat.
But the most energetic line in Borderlands 1 was a single innocuous thing in the General Knox DLC when you find Scooter some special car parts.
Oh, smoking Jesus titty cinnamon, that is a monster! That's gonna be swear!
I remember laughing at that years ago, struck by how strong it was for the base game. Like, really emotive compared to all the other Pandoran dirtbags drawling about mud, guns, and dirt. So Tina, Torg, and the villain Handsome Jack are a bit of a change, a goofification. They're chugging that lemonade, you know? They're not just insane hello human resources, they're insane like drama kids. Oh, boy!
I'm the conductor of the poop train!
Now that's random. Bacon badass dubstep 420. Whoa. By the way, are you dying yet? Are you physically reacting to this yet? This is why I didn't buy this game when it came out. Let's hop in game for a sec. You pick one of 4 characters, now 6 with DLC, and find yourself attacked by Bullymongs. Bully Mongolo? Turns out they knew the name was stupid, and there's an actual in-game quest to rename them.
Bonafart. All of the bets right, we're calling them Bonafarts now. Just kill a few of them or something, I don't care anymore.
And I hope, in spite of everything I've said, you understand that is why this game is good. Very early, you start receiving comms from the villain, Handsome Jack. He's here now. Handsome Jack, everybody!
Right, Abe? Been pretty good. Just bought a pony made of diamonds. Yeah, because I'm rich. So, you know, that's cool. Goodbye.
Handsome Jack is Borderlands now. Handsome Jack is Borderlands now. He's the best and kind of the worst thing that ever happened to the series. And let me explain that. This character is excellent.
This jackal rushes me with a spoon. A freaking spoon. And I'm dying laughing, right? So I scoop out his stupid little eyeballs.
He exists for himself and eats up airtime just being genuinely evil. He's a villain you love to hate, and he's layered in ways you wouldn't expect. A truly compelling voice like something out of BioShock, but funny, quirky in that Pandoran way, personable, but just bloodthirsty enough to be unsettling. The problem is, Gearbox recognized this and seemingly extrapolated it to mean that as long as a character of any kind is mumbling some stupid bullshit on the other end of your comms device, Borderlands is doing Borderlands. They check the box. Unfortunately, they also slap some of the most painfully unfunny imbeciles possible in the Handsome Jack earworm role, meaning that Jack's accidental brilliance was impossible to meaningfully replicate and has created the great Borderlands problem: unfunny stand-up routines. Why would you platform Jerry Seinfeld? The game is entirely about stopping Jack. Borderlands 2 is Jack. And it makes sense, he's so persistently in your eardrums, bothering you, being a prick. The guy's an unhinged megalomaniacal CEO and you're directly opposing him. This is a universe where if you die and have money, you're reconstructed at a nearby Digistructor, or whatever the fakey sci-fi universe explanation is. And Jack offers you a pile of money to kill yourself for his amusement, to make you his
Okay. I guess you just killed yourself. Head back to the bounty board and I'll pay you. But, just 1 second. No matter what happens, I just want you to remember one thing. You're a sellout. You killed yourself because of paid you to. You're a bitch.
This is maybe the best thing in the entire game. Borderlands 2 sells a jokey maniac so well, with its own premises, plays with the game mechanics and universe. It's perfect. It's incredible. They never did it this well again. So Borderlands 2 ends up feeling like the most intentionally well-constructed package, the most in tune with itself, even when it's hard to sit through.
You got Princess Fluffy Butt? Oh man. This party's gonna be off the chisel for Rizzo!
You can't be talking like that, white baby. The biggest change is Pandora itself. The world was a dust bowl in one, and green made up such a small fraction of the environments you can count the places with actual grass on a single hand. Borderlands 2 spiced things up, not only tossing the player ass-deep into the snow for the opening hour, but eventually handing them whole seas of green. The highlands, riddled with dingy caves, sure, but the point remains. Color was a priority, maybe to reflect the narrative, the insane characters, maybe to show off more facets of Pandora, visually leaning into its linguistic identity. This is why soda streams run through Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. They wanted Mountain Dew, but couldn't get the rights. More than green, whole zones are color-coded in ways the original never aspired to. We see a clear and intentional initiative to create visual identities for zones a la World of Warcraft, maintaining a core palette and setting the tone, zone over zone. The original game really struggled for visual appeal at times, and while I think it's beautiful in its own way, a lonely space western you occasionally stumble across spots of color within on the winding path to completion, Borderlands 2 is extremely video games. What is that? Wow, Minecraft in my Borderlands! Epic! This is like going to Chick-fil-A and finding out they put hating minorities in my spicy deluxe combo. I think if the goal was to hard pivot away from the first game's visual direction and show off as much of the world as possible, they did an incredible job. Getting to see Jack's floating city is such a departure from the dirt trawling of the original, but it's a triumphant departure. Like, yeah, I knew there was so much more to this series, and that's why it's so hard to be cynical about the changes. There will always be Dirt Town, but maybe there's hope. Sorry, that's way too precious for a video on Borderlands. One of Borderlands 2's best design features is a total overhaul of the corporations and what their brands mechanically contribute to the game. Before, you could kind of understand that elemental weapons came from Maliwan for the most part, and that Jacob's guns had good damage. They had slogans, they were steeped in Americana, they had mechanics, but they were boring. And an easy point of injection for quality McMotherfucking design. Now we've got bandit guns with trash stats but big mags, hot colors, and true makeshift designs. Jacob's guns have a crit bonus, look as Old West as you can get from this setting, and can fire as fast as you can click, making them kinetic in a way other guns aren't. TDR guns are cheap, but get thrown like grenades on reload, digistructing back in your hand, but man, you can throw RPGs like javelins, dude! Torg loves explosions, so the bullets are miniature explosions. They aren't all super unique, but now now it's obvious what gun you're holding. The manufacturers are distinct and competing with each other in a way that's easy to immediately understand. They all have individual aesthetics as well, making use of patterns and parts the others don't. These only get better in Borderlands 3 with the abundance of weaponry, the incredible drop rate for legendaries, further refinement of brand identities, and second fire options for guns, making the entire gun collecting experience significantly more varied and interesting. I want to say the characters are super spicy this time around, but I think it took them until the pre-sequel to really clinch the ability shooter concept, making characters with multiple distinct builds. They do have those here, but the actual action skills that define characters aren't incredible. To show you what I mean, the Gunzerker was an awesome addition, allowed players to enter a berserking state like double-fisting rocket launchers and things, exactly where you want to be for a series like Borderlands. He replaced Brick and had big shoes to fill, but I think it was a great evolution over Bald White Guy from 2008 specifically. Zero is also a sort of upgrade over Mordecai. While I love that character, getting an ability that both distracts enemies and cloaks the player is a powerful upgrade. In the old days, I spec'd hard into Bloodwing, meaning I would spam the thing relentlessly. It's not a super engaging ability. This past playthrough, I spec'd as hard as possible into crits and revolvers, meaning I could almost ignore the ability entirely and pop heads. I say this to illustrate that there were multiple ways to play old characters. Shoot, Mordecai is also the resident sniper, but Zero had an ability with nuance. He had a primitive melee assassin build, sniping, pistol crits, and more than all of that, he was a clear product of the internet age. His face mask displays emotions via emoticons, literally old World of Warcraft AOL type stuff, actual relics cast in the amber of the game's case. It's something people tend to kind of hate about Borderlands, but it's still uniquely Borderlands. And that's the thing. The Gunzerker, Zero with his Leet Speak name, these were direct pushes towards making Borderlands bigger, brighter, more colorful, younger, and punk in its own way, doing something that might get a character laughed out of any other series. Of course, Axton exists, so hear me out, guys. What if instead of a black guy with a turret, we made him a white guy instead? Maya's an interesting addition. Her ability is highly useful in group situations, locking down a targeted enemy, legitimate crowd control, though Borderlands was still in its design infancy. So she's hard to call exciting. Maya looks like a Borderlands character, and that's good, but her actual play is fairly bland. Not entirely one note, there's some nuance in the builds, but again, later games started doing character through mechanics so much better. I also have to mention the DLC bros. Krieg was a fascinating addition, not only letting players play as a psycho, the guy on the box, the branding, but also having an officially endorsed and supported melee-focused character in a gun game. You might think, but that's detracting from the design! But handing the player different choices, different ways to express themselves, especially in a game this colorful, is only a good thing, and we respect it. It makes the DLC factor less cynical, like, hey, here's something fun, but only if you want it. Now Gage. Oh, Gage. I picked Gage the Mechromancer for my run, and I did it for a very specific reason. Anyone else feel like a story? Once upon a time, there was a man named John Hemingway, the lead designer for Borderlands 2, and he went on record calling Gage, or at least one of her skill trees, the girlfriend mode. Girlfriend, huh? What's that mean, John? Well, Gage's ability is quite literally hit and forget, but she also has unique mechanics that you admittedly need to sink points into to access, but they are there. They let Gage's bullets ricochet. So what, right? That sounds fun. And hardly broken, it's 3D space. It's Borderlands. Fat chance they actually hit anything. So I thought, playing Gage through the entire game, not really understanding the girlfriend character comment. Sure, her action skill is lame, a robot with a strong melee and ranged attack that just goes off and does damage, no micromanagement, no nothing. It'll even get you up if you kill someone, but that's not enough to call her the girlfriend character. I streamed the game to my audience in Discord who informed me that I was playing Gage wrong. From someone who cleared a lot of high-end, high-difficulty content, you're actually, with the Anarchy build, optimally is supposed to shoot at the ground, let Gage reload naturally, then keep shooting the ground, and so on, building stacks, endlessly shooting. Because Gage's bullets don't ricochet. They bounce off the ground and home in to a nearby enemy, guaranteeing damage. Played optimally, Gage doesn't even play the game. She just shoots something else and does free damage. There is nothing I can contribute here verbally that's funnier than that man did that. Wow. Gameplay enhancements beyond the characters are worth mentioning. It's important to look at the original Borderlands as a prototype, an experiment. So enemy design isn't exactly complex. The most you get is fishing for enemy weak points, racks that flit around and dive bomb, and spider ants that have head armor you're made to carefully shoot through, etc. It's usually a matter of having a rock to hide behind and time. Borderlands 2 made a point of varying enemy design so that it wasn't just swarms of whatever getting up in your business with no mechanical considerations. They still do that, but in 5 fresh new flavors! A few enemy types can be sent into an evolutionary spiral, getting stronger over time the longer they're allowed to rampage. They even level up into badasses, meaning you have to put them down fast or risk death. That level up mechanic was also handed to Varkids, these flying insects that can become challenging without making them just outright obnoxious, like the racks in 1. Jack has his own enemy suite, the Loaders, these chunky robots animated with so much charisma. You'll be shocked that they're just generic kill bots. These get digistructed in, or straight up airdropped, blasted into the fray, making Jack feel like an actual threat, someone who can bother you at any moment the minute he knows where you are, which feeds into his ethos so well. Oh yeah, the bosses actually feel like bosses, at least a little bit. Definitely more than whatever was going on in the first. Meat sack blasting, DPS racing hit point repositories. There's a degree of intentionality, some actual mechanical variation between the bosses, which feels like the bare minimum for this kind of game. Regardless of my earlier poo-pooing, Borderlands 2 felt like a complete package, and that's worth a lot for a video game. Randall Pitchford voices Crazy Earl.
What you want?
I feel like I could have gone my whole life not knowing that and been happier. People are probably wondering why I'm giving Randy such a hard time. Can't he catch a break? He's a likable guy. He didn't do nothing. Randall Pitchford alleged squirting porn. Oh, Randy! Randy Bo Bandy! Underage women? What the fuck? This man is such a character. Great nephew of a famous magician, learns magic tricks, pulls them out at events to impress crowds, and for my next trick, I'll make the charges disappear! Bro, how did you do that? The story of Borderlands 2 is good on its face for a number of reasons. It highlights the cutthroat nature of power-mad CEOs and sheds the relative friendliness and just doing my jobness and inscrutable alien resistance vibes by putting Jack in the other corner. He starts the game as your employer and betrays you immediately, leaving you for dead as you crawl through the frozen wastes. You eventually join up with the Crimson Lance, originally enemies in the first game, now your best bet to offer meaningful Pandoran resistance to Hyperion. This is all headed by Lilith and Roland and assisted by the other old Vault Hunters, meaning your characters went on to make a genuine impact in the world that extends beyond enlightened self-interest, let's call it. I'm liking this already. The plot twists and turns through a series of individual goals. Fetching a vault key, a fairly unsurprising betrayal occurs. Sanctuary's shields are lowered, letting Jack rain laser fire down until Lilith moves the entire city. It's pulpy, focused on the next big scene in a way the original wasn't. Probably a feature of the budget. Jack's actual plan involves forcibly controlling an Iridian weapon called the Warrior, but it's still tucked away in a vault. So the party hunts for the key, and that's when Jack actually establishes himself. This moment is important. Pithy previous commentary notwithstanding, they lulled players into a false sense of security, showing the heroes of the first game working together towards a common goal, capable of incredible feats, and Jack just blows bro's midsection all over the ground in front of you. What happened to his shield? Was it on recharge? Is Jack's weapon just that powerful? It's not mind-blowing or anything, but it's a perfect expression of the Jack dynamic that made Borderlands 2 stick with players. Bro's such a narcissistic sociopath. He not only sucks up all the radio airtime he can force his will on protagonists of previous games. He can supplant the Borderlands identity. I think Jack works only because they were willing to go so far with him, which is important to keep in mind for Borderlands 3. It's not the only Jack kill in the game. He supercharges and kills Mordecai's bird. Man, killing animals? That's how you know he's evil. You know, maybe Marcus is the final boss. The story culminates with a race to the vault, putting down the warrior, and eventually shooting it out with Jack so he can whine about how unfair it all is, that we're here and he's there, and you can even let Lilith kill him if you're really invested in his soliloquy, like the ending of Fable 2.
No rest for the wicked.
Why would you say that? But let's not forget the add-on adventures. I played through almost all of Borderlands 2's DLCs, but I'll admit outright that I ignored the pirate one. It's more Borderlands and there's a pirate. That'll be $10. If anything, I'm floored by what people will pay for and what's actually on offer. The DLCs -1 don't really say a whole lot. It don't really change up the formula. They're exactly what Borderlands 1 did. More game. At least in the original run, the DLC was kept to a minimum. No new characters, a side mode, a fun little tone-exploring romp, and 2 major quests in the setting. 2 offered Krieg and Gage, sold separately of course, a pack of cosmetics we're not going to talk about, and some side quests. A Torg's Splody Adventure, or whatever, is the tale of exploding some stuff, and Torg is there, doing his best Macho Man Randy Savage impression. You know, I want to say something all incredulous and exasperated, but all I have to do is... Not funny. Didn't laugh. What I expected was an inconsequential time sink, and that's exactly what I got.
VR gaming. Wait, what?
Oh, it was a slow death. I see.
The Tiny Tina DLC is important, okay? So important it's right there on Wikipedia. Tiny Tina made people cry, apparently. Not to diminish... Not to diminish the impact. I'm sure plenty of players were floored when Roland was shot out of the plot, but see, guys, killing the only black protag. What did Gearbox mean by this? To peel back the cynicism a bit, there's a short that introduced Krieg, the DLC character, to the masses, which was a meat bicycle built for 2, which acts as a micro-love story between Krieg and Maya. And I didn't expect much from it. I was mostly expecting to clip cringe, but when I watched it, I kind of understood. I can see someone 10 years ago looking at this as decent emotional material.
But right now, if you don't listen to me, she's gonna die, and it's gonna be your fault.
Turn around, pretty lady!
Like, yes, it's undercutting its own potential by having to scream poop all the time. There is actual drama there, though, between a character who can't express himself meaningfully and the person he wants to be with. And that's kind of the Borderlands story. Some players and fans do manage to tap into the earnestness that is unfortunately buried under layers of either bad references or generally unfunny comedy. That's not to say Borderlands emotionality bad, per se, just that the series itself isn't really built to convey it with any kind of eloquence, the way you see Tales from the Borderlands do so well. Where were we? Oh, Roland's death and the Tina DLC. Don't worry, Tina, he's just Roland on the floor, laughing! We're made to roam around Sanctuary asking everyone how they felt about Roland.
I'm sad. Is this what sad feels like? You kill the crap out of Jack.
But since Tina doesn't live in Sanctuary, we never get her take. Tiny Tina's assault on Dragon Keep is the answer to that very obvious question. She didn't deal with it, and the DLC is her playing D&D, or Bunkers and Badasses, yikes, with the other Vault Hunters while she works through her grief. The concept is good, though it's an interesting aesthetic shift. You wouldn't have caught anybody in Borderlands 1 playing D&D, but see, Anthony Birch is here, and his level 9 wizard is really cool, you guys, because the backstory is... And so now, Jack and Tina are Borderlands. It's the geekification of the series, more or less, and that's fine. It still works within the silly, cruelty as comedy framework to a point, but if someone changes my in-game alignment to chaotic chonky, I will kill them. It's also not really worth litigating. Jack appears as a villain. Roland helps save the day. The environments are fun and flashy, stuff they'd eventually retread in Tiny Tina's Wonderlands almost a decade later. So it was clearly always a priority or personal fascination, and for what it's worth, some of the jokes actually land. It's playful with the narrative, making you think you can help some people when in reality, you're going to get funneled into a boss fight regardless. You can skip puzzles by blowing them up. God, I wish that were me. At one point, you're doing an impossible platform puzzle until the players whine enough for Tina to just give it to the player. I know these struggles, I've DM'd plenty, and it's cute to see retold in a game I like. And for what it's worth, even if it's hard to look at the very intentionally silly Borderlands, in an age after Rick and Morty and so many others, trying to play up the serious side of things, it's not bad. And it struck a chord with players, so now we're stuck with Tiny Tina forever.
We're playing bunkers and badasses, baby!
That's right. This is your fault. These are just the DLCs I played. Gearbox pumped out pack after pack, usually highlighting a specific character to push the brand and centralize the narrative. Keep it from expanding past reasonable borders. Get it?
Savages roam these lands. Nevertheless, we shall be fine so long as we don't make too much noise.
Anthony! You went to school? Orientalism? Anything like that? Colonial critique? Ooga booga? It was massively played in its time, with huge swaths of fans running challenge mode and grinding for loot. And for such a short main campaign, and no real PvP to speak of, that's amazing. The final DLC involves Lilith the Firehawk and co. staving off another planty threat to Pandora. I think something happens in this one. Fill me in if you've got any leads. This particular quest is actually important for releasing in 2019, 7 years after the original release and unavailable on older versions of the game, accessible via the PC versions and the Handsome Jack Collection version. But at least they threw something in that bag. Rainbow weapons! Oh my god, it was released in June. Borderland woke! And it wasn't all greed. The thing released for free during the first month. It was Gearbox trying to bridge the gap from 2 to 3, especially for players who may have forgotten the general story beats of a game they played young to adult Link ago. At least that's what online descriptions say the DLC does, but for the most part, a guy from the Tales game shows up, some other dudes are here. None of the Borderlands 3 unique characters are here, of course. It's a series of plot beats to set Lilith up as important and tie up other loose ends. I want to mention that even through Borderlands 2, I found it almost impossible to take the stories fully seriously, and that isn't completely fair, but it's a lot to do with presentation. Borderlands has historically been jokey and unserious, bending suspension of disbelief to the breaking point for a gag and shifting tonally in so many colorful ways. Borderlands 2 established the universe proper, full of these vibrant, eccentric personalities who almost never actually get cutscenes and who are stuck kind of bopping around in their extremely primitive 3D models, almost never actually doing anything. That is, Borderlands was never committed to selling story, even if it's telling one anyway. Anthony Birch said so. The people who worked on the Tales game said so. Borderlands definitely isn't selling narrative via mechanics very well. You know, your mechanics, your schlooting, doesn't intersect with the plot or the narrative meaningfully, except that, for example, you're a vault hunter looking for treasure, so you do, and get physically stronger. You could argue that bosses having distinct levels and general level reflexive stat bottlenecking, meaning you can't brute force things unless you're about the same level, makes it clear that you need to actually go out and vault hunt to take down Jack. But that's just about every video game with level ups, so nothing special. But it was fun. Something for people to chew on for actual years. Some interesting stuff happened between 2 and 3, though, and we watched this franchise expand in interesting ways, and particularly by acknowledging that gameplay was good, but story, right, selling a universe, needed special attention. Trouble is, how are you going to sell story projects without that world-famous play?
Welcome, friends, to an extremely normal episode of the KBash show, just the way that you remember it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll just play this pre-recorded review while I enjoy my Vegemite sandwich.
This ain't us, Lil. This ain't you.
Fire!
Borderlands, the pre-sequel, is tragic. I think at some point, everyone who gets successful selling art has to come to terms with the reality that nobody really cares how impressive your little details are and how well you did. If it doesn't scan as brilliant, if it's not instantly exciting, it's doomed to irrelevance, except to small audiences, most of the time, no matter how good your ingredients are. And that's mostly a critique of consumers, but I think it's true. Borderlands 2 looked like a unicorn to gamers. Better Borderlands! The pre-sequel instantly reads as more Borderlands 2, which is partially true. The game was launched a brisk 2 years after the past installment, and aside from some mechanical shakeups, feels more or less identical. It sold like relatively speaking anyway, so much so that planned DLC was pulled. Unlike Borderlands 2, it's a failed content factory, only receiving as much support as the devs thought it warranted, passively confirming what gamers feared. It was a cash grab, or at least that's how it looked from the outside. Something art intersecting with capital, please watch my Vanillaware video. Actually digging into the thing, the pre-sequel is the birth of modern Borderlands mechanical design, and a huge win for the series in terms of character variance. It successfully moves Borderlands off-world to Pandora's moon, and with some brilliant visual work, and actually sticks the landing. It continues Jack's legacy directly, giving old-school players more of exactly who they reacted to, and keeps the same referential irreverence of the second game intact.
Mexicans are ruining this country! I'm racist!
That's right, we've got a hot dog in our game, and he's racist. Oh, what a jest. What a jape indeed. It's a sadly overlooked experience sitting awkwardly in the middle ground between classic and modern Borderlands. So let's cut this thing open. The pre-sequel can... Man, I hate that name. It says nothing. I get it. It's a prequel, but it's also a sequel. To what? I didn't play 2 until this year! Borderlands, Jack's adventure starts with Athena of the first game, captured by Lilith and asked to explain her connection to Jack or be executed. So... No! I don't want to go to the moon! Put me back! You're immediately thrust into action, helping Jack escape an imploding space installation and spend the game in his direct employ. And that goes about how you'd expect. Everyone knows Jack is a maniac, but to dig into the character proper, Gearbox knows they've got to put you face to face with the guy, and better yet, complicit with his rise to power. He's very much in the Delita of FFT strain of characters, regular people who clawed their way to the top and lost themselves along the path. It's a rich, loamy base for a story. Oh, alien guy, this is why it's hard to take the pre-sequel seriously outside of its solid premise. This guy shows up and assists the acting antagonist, shows up at the end for a cliffhanger scene, and never comes back in any context, not in Borderlands 3 and not in Tales 2. Anthony! Why is he here? The moon is a little different than Pandora. It's got its own history and culture, which is another way of saying that since the game was pubbed and devved by 2K Australia with assistance from Gearbox, it's just Space Australia. Somehow a Team 4-star meme is a real video game that happened.
G'day,
Space Australia is a nice place, pleasantly surprising for something that I was sure was going to suck. I mean, how many times can you reflavor the moon? Turns out, just enough to keep the thing interesting. You'll get these huge swaths of land dotted with structures, housing quests and skirmishes, all color-coded with harsh, contrasting hues that maintain the series' pop, especially the stuff they established in 2, but spun for space. Glowing reds and soft blues, purple and yellow, all topping rich, dark, spacey tones. The result is something that looks vaguely alien, always colored in a way that your brain can make sense of, but nothing like Earth or even Pandora. So laser tag, and particularly in contrast to what the early games established as normal. The way some shows and films are color-graded green or yellow, lending a sense of unease to things. And why don't we try that? Let's color things in here like Borderlands. And it avoids slog by varying mission locales. Plenty of quests are set on the moon's surface, but others are hidden away in enormous, highly vertical zones, factories, bases, other space installations. The world is much smaller than the world of Borderlands 2, but you still traverse so much of it on foot, and by jump pad, you get your 10K steps regardless. Fitbit joke! Just about as topical and well-timed as Borderlands comedy! Since the bulk of the game occurs on an unterraformed planet, the surface is inhospitable and the air lacks oxygen. Like every anime convention I've ever been to, the world turns into something like Metroid Prime 2, with pockets of safe zones scattered across the maps and oxygen dropping from corpses to maintain player momentum. Some players hate this kind of environmental hazard, but I love it. Texturing play in ways that make you actually pay attention to the environment is a choice I respect, and one that probably only would have worked for this one game, so I'm glad they took the opportunity when they had it. It means instead of just rolling in and doing damage, I actually have to mind when to hop away and get a refill. Not that it's particularly punishing. Losing your oxygen causes your health to waste away, but it's a very generous timer. And I only died a single time for lack of oxygen by just not paying attention. And you can't get mad at the game for that. Man, life is so bullshit. I take my eyes off the road and it's a national tragedy. What a bunch of crap. With the reduced gravity, players are able to jump significantly higher, and that would suck normally because sure, platforming across buildings mid-battle is awesome, but you know the overly floaty jumps would turn regular field mobility into a slog, especially in tighter platforming segments. The answer? Butt bombing! Yeah, you can ground pound in the pre-sequel, sending yourself down instantly and, depending on your gear, trigger various effects. I picked up a special piece of gear that... Wow, really guys? Real mature, ontologically evil Randall Pitchford. The sum of these mechanical changes is no, seriously, farting? Farting on ground pound? You think you're funny? The sum of these mechanical changes is a higher mobility, higher control Borderlands game that pushes the concept probably to the breaking point on 7th gen consoles. Shooters like these were built for PC, specifically because the mobility inherent to play and your method of dealing damage, shooting people, demands more precision than other games might. But mercifully, abilities are also spiced up across the board. Athena, the character I picked, is almost an RPG-style tank, if only because of her unique skill. She can temporarily raise her shield and suck in incoming damage, returning it with a Captain America-style toss. And from this base ability, spec into support options, melee and elemental status ailment stuff, retaining the value of her unique skill, but offering different flavors of play. Claptrap makes his first playable appearance, and like you'd expect, perfectly in line with the culture. Okay, Claptrap can provide the team with lol random. That's like just actually random old Borderlands character skills, meaning he can be incredibly useful or the most annoying thing in the world, and I think that's great. Throw him in the ring. Why the hell not? Mechanically convey why everyone loves or hates Claptrap. Huge flavor win, 10 out of 10. Now, Nisha is purely offensive and less interesting overall, letting players unload their mags and swap between targets like an Old West gunslinger souped up for Borderlands in particular. The team needed a hard DPS, and here she is. This huge mercenary dude acts as the Roland or Axton of the group, and admittedly, he's the least quirky character in the game, still doing better than Gage with her one-button solution known as Death Trap, because Wilhelm here can summon 2 robots. One that attacks enemies and one that heals you, meaning that at the minimum, you have 2 little health bars to keep track of. It's not the most endearing design, but the guy can act something like his own team during solo play, and that's important for people struggling to break in, especially if they initially picked one of the more support-oriented characters and suffered with the arguably more challenging experience. The 2 other DLC characters exist as well. Handsome Jack's body double can summon clones to help in battle, which works well enough. Give him some varied gameplay, let him take on different roles in the party by distracting enemies or helping with DPS, and especially don't give players Jack, but let them live in the character's shadow. Let them be surrounded by images of Jack, and still never let them step into his shoes. I can't tell you how goddamn smart these designers are. Brilliant concept, perfectly captures what Borderlands is doing, especially with the new direction, comments on Jack's singularity in the franchise, and gives the character many facets because his identity is eclipsed by Jack's. Enormous dub. The final character, and siren adjacent but not actually a siren, interesting choice, is the group's sniper as well. And that's fantastic. Finally a sniper with crowd control potential. Quality kiting. She can appoint one party member to servant status because she's an imperious twat, letting those 2 characters benefit from buffs, and she can control the field slightly with her ice shard, K-Cool. If anything, I appreciate that she highlights team play and gives snipers a reason to exist. It's the type of character that might have gotten me into sniping if I did play this on console. In the past, I almost always would have picked the revolver, the character skill, the melee option for any other sniper character because It's just not that fun in this game without mouse and keyboard. It's a quality cast, and hopefully you can see how this group of characters works better in squad play and solo play than many older characters did. While it works narratively either way, Vault Hunters are greedy murder hobos, it helps when the multiplayer game is consistently designing for multiplayer. The pre-sequel was interesting to run for a bunch of reasons, but one in particular is the challenge. Pre-sequel will punch your cock. Oh, sorry. I meant to write that Anthony Birch style. Pre-sequel may or may not inflict instant blunt force trauma to your genitalia/lower pelvic region. Pretty good impression, huh? Borderlands games aren't particularly easy, especially on console, where relying on abilities and levels and gear is much more important than PC, and solo play is noticeably more difficult because some encounters in these games are out and out designed for multiplayer. Otherwise, you've got to pick your targets and be smart, especially from 2 and on. Now, I know someone's typing finger is itching right now, but listen, I'm trying to help you. Normally, people are like, "You think the game is hard? You suck?" And it's like, no. I'm trying to tell you that they actually have encounter design now. Some enemies heal other enemies. Those evolutionary enemies become problems if not prioritized. This is a good thing. The ending sequence is kind of like biting a jawbreaker, with enemies spawning all around you, never dying, demanding a ton of concentrated effort and endurance to consistently take down, something that strains the Borderlands formula to a point. The games have always been about quick, snappy rewards, loot explosions, and big flashy moves, so dragging things out, exacerbated as it is by the flooding mechanics, reflavors the game in a way that might strain enjoyment. But it's also highly curated, revealing intentionality to the design that the older games don't always show. Yes, they all look like visual but that doesn't mean they mechanically act that way. The final boss is brutal, especially trying to navigate around his moves in 3D space, almost unable to read them fast enough to react to on account of his size and accounting for the gravity issue. It pushed me to my limits, and I'm really impressed it only took one go. I figure, without multiplayer, having someone to have your back, especially when the game isn't offering up free and easy second win targets, is a must for the experience, but makes the game that much better as well. Thankfully, Borderlands was always popular, just not this one. To get the most out of the pre-sequel, it's probably best to be steeped in Borderlands, like you've played the first 2 games, and even played the Tales game, or plan to, got a friend or 3. Anything less, and yep, it's just more Borderlands with some mechanical changes. It's a deeply referential title, both in what it calls back to and what it pulls from. Star Wars references. There's a guy called Stirwin.
It's Stirwin!
Get it? Because Steve Irwin was Australian. At least the thing actually pulls off a critique of limp British imperialism by having this person set up shop on the already colonized moon. Good show. Fair play. The pre-sequel is largely concerned with Jack, his rise to prominence and psychopathy. It's one of the tightest Borderlands stories ever told, having a contained arc with each mission bringing Jack closer to power and closer to inhumanity. Jack was an office schlub who scraped by until he was eventually fired and clawed his way back by taking out the right people and keeping others under his thumb. In Borderlands 2, he's an annoying, hyper-arrogant jerk-ass, but there was a time when he wasn't, and we get to see how poor treatment at the hands of a corporation can make a guy throw up his hands and lay them on his boss's neck. In a world with so much technology, these corporate hellscapes riddled with discarded weapons of war and alien technology, death everywhere, it's not hard to imagine someone losing their mind, giving into the chaos. The plot puts Jack in the driver's seat and treats the player, especially in multiplayer, like the squad of hired goons they are. You follow Jack, you watch him murder people once you've done the heavy lifting, you watch him overwrite a burgeoning AI's identity so it's not annoying and just does its job. You watch him descend into madness, and you do nothing to stop it because you're never given the option. It's a pretty stunning critique of the enlightened self-interest driving the players across these games otherwise, because at almost no point is it ever questioned whether the player is doing the right thing, even for their own well-being, because they're entirely controlled by material needs or outright greed. You're stuck with Jack because ultimately you can tolerate Jack. it's true to life as well. People absolutely will tolerate incredible disrespect and degradation, appalling behaviors, as long as tolerating means there's no actual conflict. For that alone, it's my favorite story in the mainline Borderlands games, saying something true and uncomfortable, which is partly why this game failing is so annoying, but shooters were moving on, you know. People were salivating over BioShock 3, a game still listed at the top of so many charts. I'm not even mad about it! It changed gaming culture the way Borderlands 2 did before it, and in the face of these staggering successes, pre-sequel looked unrefined, even amateur. I have to admit, there are problems with Borderlands games that I can't perceive because I'm not interested in playing them the way some people are. They're pretty notorious for creating repeat players, challenging higher difficulties for better loot ad nauseum, doing loot grinds, which is not why I play video games, but I can respect other people's enjoyment. Until it's video game addiction, and then we got a problem. Allegedly, pre-sequel had a worse endgame than 2, which is a pretty rough place to be, following up 2. It's not a surprise that after the game went quiet when people moved on or moved back to 2, Gearbox took a moment to assess and funneled so much money and time into 3 it had to be successful regardless of any past game comparisons. 2 is one of the best-selling games ever shipped. Whatever it was doing was destined to become studied and replicated in the future. The tight dev cycle and relative failure of pre-sequel as a mainline Borderlands experience didn't allow it the time or support it probably needed to become as bright a star as its predecessors. Once the bar is raised, you can't half-ass it anymore, especially with gamers who will ignore the budget, the dev cycle, complications, etc., and judge it by its price tag and the series' past successes, because that's how people are. Pre-sequel had a kind of wanky Claptrap's Mine DLC and other plans that were eventually cut for budgetary reasons. By all accounts, at least based on the series' performance thus far, pre-sequel was a disaster. And it sucks because this is the one where characters feel really, truly varied, interesting, open-ended. Man, they took the time to have individual characters respond to NPCs in-game, creating so much dialogue that originally never had to be accounted for. It's a different vibe in so many ways. Every time you play, there is good here, but success, as we all know, has never merely been about good ideas or smart design. This title that Randy Pitchford was hopeful would act as 2K's dev staff's breakout hit, in spite of the actual product, ended the studio entirely. I can't even imagine the heartbreak, getting your hands on the Borderlands IP, doing great things, and losing your job for it. Sure, that's the norm in this market, but I hope people know that in light of all of 2023 and 4's game dev decimation, that pre-sequel was a fantastic example 10 years prior that for some studios, games aren't allowed to be a 7 out of 10, or sell that way, anyhow.
Hey, handsome.
The Tales subseries is an interesting point in the lineage. Through comparison, it illustrates the nature of soul. And I'm not kidding. That word we sometimes use for art we like that has no concrete meaning and means nothing to anyone but the speaker. Tales from the Borderlands, defining soul. This duology started as a little contract gig for Telltale Games, who just finished with their massively popular The Walking Dead game. It didn't end well for them. Of course, the shuttering wasn't this game's fault. It was a process that took years, but you can see things unthreading as early as this title. The first chapter launched in 2014, with subsequent chapters released over the course of a year. It works well in conjunction with the pre-sequel, a game plenty of Borderlands players never bothered with, but also taps into the second and first game to keep players grounded. It is, to this day, the only truly worthwhile story in the Borderlands games, the only one that takes actual advantage of the medium to put Borderlands world at the forefront, immerse players in the setting, and get them to care about any character at all. And more than that, it actually managed to capture what Borderlands is, the irreverence, the color, without becoming a parody of itself in the process. From a completely secondary studio. Can we buy them a gift basket? What do you do when a dev team is good? Has anyone ever thought of this before? Traditionally, Borderlands was never much for story. How could it be? It was created in a laboratory by ontologically evil Randall Pitchford and co. as a synthesis of Diablo and any boomer shooter. It is profoundly evil by design, tapping directly into players' pleasure centers and draining them of everything it can. It is what the corporations of the Borderlands games do to Pandora to its own players. You know, I like having a beer, but I know it's no good for my gut. I like drinking espresso, still bad for your teeth. So yeah, I can't imagine how dopamine burnout would be bad for a person. I can't imagine that being an issue. Story's been an afterthought, a thing that carries players from place to place and contextualizes schlooting, like you'd expect. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Plenty of people love and hate the Tales games for their own reasons, and that's fine. But they're doing something interesting in the medium, and I was really surprised by the experience. What it does right, something the other games could never do by design, is put the player in the shoes of entirely regular people, corporate salary bros with everything to lose, a cutthroat ecosystem just close enough to the insanity of Pandora to add texture and nuance, actual verisimilitude to the world of Borderlands, and have them stumble through an equally insane adventure facing certain death the whole way through. And yeah, it's a little Reddit, and yeah, it's a little lol random.
Heads up.
Hell yeah. But it's written in such a compelling way, it's hard to take any actual offense. Game's fun, even if it's mostly cutscene. The party is bigger than these two, Reese and Vaughn, and includes a pair of native Pandorans as well, Fiona and Sasha, who struggle through their miserable pissant existence on a destitute planet determined to drain or outright kill every one of its inhabitants. America. These characters have wildly different backgrounds, but plenty in common. Never quite having enough, never quite feeling safe, even if one pair are the product of highly regulated privilege and the others are scraping out something resembling a life in the dirt. This tension drives all character interaction. They bounce off each other meaningfully, learn each other's ways, and come to appreciate their unique capabilities. They triumph in unexpected places. They fall in love, get hurt, they betray each other.
Like I said, I would never betray you, bro! You forgive me? That's bro. We don't talk like that.
Because most of the story is recounted by Reese and Fiona retroactively, insane, tone-obliterating breaks with the narrative plunge the experience into something like magic realism.
I am a winner!
You're left to guess what was embellished, as all tall tales definitionally are, and what actually happened. I really can't understate this enough. Tales from the Borderlands is genius. The studio understood the heart of the IP better than the IP holders, at least where telling stories about this universe is concerned. They worked its brand of irreverence into every character. They're all deadpan snarkers, but it's deserved. They come from their own little hells, and seriously, now I'm dealing with this guy? They successfully translated the insanity, the jovial disrespect for all things, into the narration, refusing to let a perfect canon form, undercutting the story with sudden lies. Even better, this hazy form of storytelling actually riffs on the American tall tale concept, something foundational to Borderlands' narrative origins. That understanding is even integrated into the visuals and the mechanics. Admittedly, Telltale Games was never one for fidelity. They're a budget operation and the games make it obvious. But what better pick for a Borderlands story? Animations are primitive. Most of the budget is clearly wrapped up in animations regardless. Characters jerk their heads, try to emote, and while it's not perfect, it looks better than anything the actual Borderlands games ever did, somehow looking exactly like any of the main games. I don't even think Borderlands does that anymore. I don't want to spend all day interrogating the plot because for the most part, it's a high-energy romp across multiple different familiar and new areas in the series, explored from that non-Vault Hunter angle. I love that they took the opportunity to showcase regular people. One of the characters gets handed a derringer with a single bullet. A single bullet! until significantly later in the game when access to a regular weapon becomes mandatory for the character, and, critically, after meeting other Vault Hunters, all the old faces, deciding she might eventually become one herself. Sasha's is a little less impactful than some. She's a generally competent, streetwise individual who works through her personal issues with betrayal after a certain in-game event, but otherwise kind of exists to balance out the group, be a utility anchor, and tie the party to a bandit who is at times friend and foe over the course of the story. She's necessary and interesting, but not a ton to reflect on. Vaughn's arc is interesting, if only because he's one of the few people to visit Pandora and feel anything other than repulsion. Guy loves it here, citing feeling alive for the first time, and I get that. Being an accountant's gotta suck, dude. Looking at spreadsheets all day, numbers. I'm about to look like a Borderlands cover art. Vaughn eventually becomes a bandit warlord, one of the only sane ones on the entire planet, and returns in the third game to berate you with trite, obnoxious rambling.
After I killed a guy with just my abs, so imagine what it takes to unite all the clans together. You'd need like a 20-pack, 18 bare mins.
See, I don't get that. Why would you kill Vaughn? Reese's arc is kind of tied to the entire plot, but it's worth mentioning that Handsome Jack does appear in this game, as an AI construct assembled by that one insane guy from the pre-sequel.
I am the smartest man alive!
Holy sh**. Now, Jack is Borderlands, so it's important he got the inclusion, even if the team was pretty open about their priorities and giving these regular people a chance to shine, which is honestly way more intelligent than just doing Jack stuff, like both 2 and the pre-sequel. AI Jack gets implanted into faux charismatic Reese via jacking in, which makes him something like Mega Man EXE, and he harangues Reese to do horrible things all throughout the game, acting like a general nuisance and helping to refine the guy's character over time. Reese is a bit of a nothing protag, an actual mediocre white guy, born conceptually into the role by marketing execs, and the game knows that, making sure he never uses his metal arm to punch someone out unless he's told to. Almost always forgets he can scan things with his robotic eye, and
Are you serious? What are you gonna roll out of the way of a bullet?
he's a moron. You get the picture. He also idolized Jack, kind of like how a certain kind of person idolizes Musk, so that's a great parallel. Wow. Reese's whole story is about becoming his own person, fitting in somewhere by dropping the facade, acknowledging himself, and improving on it. His dynamic with Jack is great. His hero, his inspiration, a horrible human being he's made to tango with until he understands that he's not and can never be Jack, and that that's a good thing. Now, that'd be a great story if he didn't end up as the head of a corporation, but he does, so anyway, Scooter dies in this game. I know it's tacky to spoil, but Borderlands isn't really an oh no spoilers kind of series. You're not gonna lose anything by knowing the twists. They aren't good, and they contextualize combat. Nothing more, nothing less. A couple of moments across the stories of Borderlands are good, stick with you longer than they should, but they're kind of like finding $5 on the ground. Not likely. Scooter joins up with the party to help out Fiona and Sasha. He just likes pretty women. Fair enough, same. And when something goes wrong on your ship that's en route to Hyperion, you're made to fix the issue alongside Scooter. This is a longtime franchise character, one of the voices of the original Borderlands. Claptrap, Scooter, Tannis, very few actually stand alongside them in terms of relevance, even among the Vault Hunters. And watching him sacrifice himself for this Pandoran drifter, and the rest of the team to boot, actually managed to pull the only emotion I got out of this entire series. That wasn't laughter, anger, or despair. Telltale, how did you do this? How did you do this? It's worth remembering that Tales was a severely challenged work on a strapped budget. The fact it's finished is amazing. The fact it tells a compelling story is amazing. The fact they managed to rework one of the scenes, which was originally a Hyperion shootout, into a ridiculous finger gun gag scene, and actually make it work in context, is a staggering achievement. So much of the first game's comedy was light, but a lot of it was effectively mean-spirited, shooting midgets. Look at the game! Here, raw, harmless goof just works. It kind of sucks because it illustrates an issue with Borderlands as a concept. It's kind of hard to explain, but these games make goof work better, I feel, than the main series ever did. The original game is a barren wasteland full of insane people. Borderlands 2 trots out the mailbox with a top hat and mustache, and suddenly things feel a bit weird. And I think it's because we're never really invited into the lives of these characters the way we are with the Tales characters, where living someone's life leaves room for these spots of color. They feel more natural than when you walk across the next site in a Borderlands game, like you're touring Disney's Cringe Mountain. You have to wonder how players felt with the staggered chapter releases. Each one is great, a little self-contained mini-arc, exactly what you'd expect. But for the finale, Telltale took it to a place that I think on paper is terrible, but in practice happens to be exactly what Borderlands is, should be. Here, look. All throughout the quest, you make friends, learn about other people, talk, help, exist in the same sphere. It's a linear story, but it's got its brief flashes of sim-type business that really immerse you, letting you chat or talk about your inventory or whatever. You're tasked with powering up this tiny robot dude, Gortys, and eventually pull it off after a series of heart-wrenching failures and roaring successes, etc., only to watch the final battle boil down to Gortys and co. versus the Vault monster. It's too strong, and Gortys doesn't actually know how to fight. Just before this mission, you were made to assemble a team of the friends you made to help crack the vault, and all of them end up in the robot, Voltron style. So each of them takes a turn helping to kick the vault monster's ass. Seriously, every last member contributes something unique, stuff that's pulled straight out of anime. This sleazebag just auras the guy. It's insane. You don't usually see the, and then everybody came together, combined their powers, and vanquished the evil, except in like Xenoblade and its ilk. But this, Tales from the Borderlands isn't just a great game and great story. This is kinography, bro. They came in, assessed the situation, started strong, pulled off something incredible for the series, almost lost the entire plot, and pinned it all together with gum, duct tape, toothpicks. People who believed in their project and clearly cared long past the point of profitability. For as jank, as amateurish as Tales can be, you can feel the soul emanating from the final product. Game whips ass, man. And then they made another one.
Foopy, foopy, doo! That fooping feeling is fooping out of you! Keep it up!
New Tales. Hey, can you just talk about this? New Tales of the Borderlands is garbage, and it really shouldn't be. Parts of the thing are solid. It plays okay. It tells a few good jokes.
Ah, him. I fired him a week ago.
Why?
Incompetence.
That sounds like a management problem. Maybe you didn't give him the tools he needed to succeed. Had you gone over a personal development plan with him?
But the thing played straight, is weird. Weirdest Borderlands game, not in the good way. Like Jerry Seinfeld weird. I take Tales of Tiny Tina over this every day. New Tales introduces players to 3 people and a robot. Yes, the game starts us in charisma debt, and not in the fun way. But that's fine. People can grow, change, you can learn to like these characters. Maybe.
Now that you're officially a team, I've designed, programmed, and activated a teamwork morale sensor, and scores your camaraderie from 1 out of 10 skateboards.
Oh, that is Randall. To say it plain, New Tales wasn't made by the first game's devs. It was handed off to a Gearbox sub-team, presumably with a B-grade budget, aiming at AAA quality regardless, using the Borderlands name to rake in free cash with no aesthetic consideration for why this might not work. Borderlands was born from the dust. It is jank by design, and that works in its favor. When the weirdo, psychotic characters are jerking around unnaturally, well, that's just Borderlands. That is the aesthetic, even if it's not super professional looking. That's what made it appear punk before it became obviously unrepentantly corporate. New Tales attempts to render a story-focused Borderlands game in full 3D at a consistent 60 FPS, which is the only time a Borderlands game has ever looked like this, and it does not work. It looks bizarre, uncanny even. Characters move in the physical space but feel distinctly inhuman, clearly constructed in a way the older models didn't. This is the fault of chasing fidelity, and the long pauses between stilted conversations lend the dialogue an AI-like quality.
Didn't see you anywhere when Malawan was blasting holes in my store.
Don't blame me for the whims of our corporate overlords. There's only one thing I want, whether it be an ice pick to the eye or slowly wasting away in debt to the Tedior Corporation, you are dead. Either way, face it, Fran. You failed. Maybe you could have been somebody once upon a time, but that was a good 10,000 Frogerts and a Malawan laser ago.
It's not bad for the overhyped insane grifter nonsense. They made Borderlands woke ethnic characters! Oh no. There are very tangible reasons for this thing's flop. Let's take a closer look. Really peel back the skin. New Tales centers around this trio, Dr. Anuradha Dar, her streetwise adoptive brother Octavio, and bandit-turned-Frogurt shop owner Fran. Did we AI generate the party too? You're also accompanied by this assassin robot who, plausible deniability established, right, got slapped on the front cover despite being a supporting cast member at best. Because, hey, Borderlands usually does a psycho, but more realistically, it's because the marketing stooges realized they couldn't sell this dude because he's ugly, this woman because, whoa dude, a smart woman with quirks? That's like the literal devil to the anti-wokes, and Fran because, well, people are gonna call any and all of these characters DEI and woke and any number of fabricated words to justify their online cry mad over not being the center of attention in every video game anymore. It's like the people who don't get why Terry is in Smash. If you need that explained to you, like, what? These characters aren't lovable at all? But it's not for lack of trying. They all get their moments, they play off each other, they change and grow. Even if they do the laziest, working through an actual manifestation of internal strife thing at the end. Admittedly only for Anu, but hey, God of War did this, so it's great actually. No, it's the framework the characters are trapped in. Rendering these characters, a highly charismatic street kid, a neurotic genius, and, well actually Fran would fit conceptually just kind of sitting there, is tough when you're working with what seems like strapped tech, a low budget, or, and the real interesting issue, being tasked with making Borderlands, just as a concept, work in 3D space, rendered at a fluid 60 FPS. Realism lands. Even in Borderlands 3, that never happened. Characters had limited animations, and the ones in Tales were jerky, exactly like the original game. It worked for the IP, but New Tales tries to make things more realistic, tries to give characters expressions and actual motion, things they don't even do in Borderlands 3, you know, the game with the infinity budget, and so the final product looks gummy, sloppy, inhuman. Bad. It doesn't do nearly enough to actually sell convincing human beings in a way that the old Tales games managed to do with ease.
I was just about to get to my favorite part. You know, where you come in and you ruin my life, you no-class scheming Pandoran scum!
Shut up!
Stop it, you're getting dirt in my eye!
Even worse, while there's no way to verify whether the writing was in fact partially generated by AI or not, it feels incredibly stilted regardless, noticeable to anybody.
So, you come into Vault Town?
Not unless the big monster guarding the vault is named Susan Coldwell. She wrecked my shop. Nearly kicked me off the wagon. Oh, that corporate butt sniffer and I have a polyamorous date with my punching fist.
So many tragedies in one sentence.
Fran, you get the whereabouts of Susan.
Susan.
Long pauses divide individual spoken lines, making it feel like a poorly dubbed RPG. The voice acting is fine, but the direction seems scattered as well. It's common for characters to speak as though something else entirely is happening in a scene. A common problem in video game voice acting, especially in lower budget or COVID-wrecked titles, but again, this is Gearbox. It reeks of a half-abandoned project. And I do have to stress, there are pockets of good here. Segments where the play works, where the Borderlands personality manages to surface from the bubbling muck, but so many of the issues are so glaring and persistent because they're fundamental flaws with the construction. I wonder what kind of game New Tales was supposed to be. Early on, you meet Octavio's friends, the robot, the LPA reparations character, a taco chef with his animal companion, and a badass sniper woman with a smelly feet fetish.
She's been caught smelling used bowling shoes. Ugh, really didn't see that coming.
I want names. And you'd be forgiven for assuming they'd stick around. But no. Once the plot picks up about an hour in, these characters almost cease to exist despite getting full introductions. Development was troubled, that isn't a secret, but it's interesting to sift through the rubble now we're here. Vaultlanders doesn't really deserve a segment, but it is interesting to watch Gearbox push a sort of merch-like minigame. even featuring characters exclusive to the original Tales game. Why is this here? I get it, gameplay shakeups, runtime extenders, sure, but the minigame is quite literally mash, tap directions 2 to 3 times to dodge the enemy's meager incoming offense, and crit them into oblivion. It's kind of insane, just entirely skewed in your favor, serving only as a speed bump, but so mythologized about in-game, it's almost reaching a funny, biting critique of consumerist bullshit, but in a game selling the most bland kind of engagement, making those critiques hits like a pillow when your own game isn't meaningfully crufty to compensate. And it's not like the conceptual stuff is bad. Anu wants to be a successful scientist and change the blindingly violent universe for the better with a device, and not a gun, that teleports things, seemingly unaware that shunting a problem off elsewhere is basically worse than actually dealing with one. But sure, egghead idiot. It's a character people get. Octavio is so profoundly stupid, but everybody knows someone who can't get anything going and doesn't want approval or help, just wants to do their own thing. I've been that guy. I mean, I could pay my bills and made a point of it, but every YouTuber, every small business owner knows what it means to believe in your own future when nobody else does. Fran's less sympathetic for me. She's got anger problems and happens to be a recovering victim of self-inflicted trauma, going on a rampage specifically. But the people in her life that make her feel worthless are very real caricatures. You will face people like this in your life. It's not that the scenario is bad here, it's how the scenario is acted out, how it all came together. Some of the anti-corporate criticism is on point too. It's doing what Borderlands has always done, except openly and pointedly, which is maybe less clever, but definitely necessary for this culture of gamers who somehow think Metal Gear never had, quote, politics, or don't understand why BioShock 3 is a train wreck for its handling of Daisy Fitzroy, something they had to take back in the second episode of a DLC, not unlike how it took an Australian dev team to call them scavs instead of midgets. This critical bent is undercut by a supporting joke character who lasts about 30 minutes of on-screen time, an unpaid intern who can only say the words, free labor.
Free labor. Free labor. Free labor. Free labor. Free labor.
Horrifying. It's horrifying. The anti-corporate messaging, Fran trying to take down CEO Susan Coldwell. None of this works narratively like it should because it's constantly undercut by fawning over cheap consumerist bullshit and tapping into abusive free labor. Your throwaway gags shouldn't undermine your foundation. And how could we forget Stapleface? Psychos in Borderlands were exclusively male for a time, but New Tales and Borderlands 3 changed that. Only there's a non-gender difference between
It's time for another pound of flesh.
And
being a psycho something you can quit?
Not without a death day! Reborn day!
And while it may be hard to put into words, one feels like I'm about to die, and the other feels like I'm about to die by my own hand. Oh, even better. Late in the game, the characters fall for a trap and get suckered into their ideal life, which is insane as a plot device. The trap layer in question could easily have expended $0 and simply captured them with their army because this trio is a pack of gunless schmucks, minus the freeze ray. They only survive by getting really lucky and sense, not sensing, for whole scenes.
God, shoot her. Why are you shooting your friend? Shoot her! She's right! She's there! You have a line of fire! I can't! Now shoot her! There's no... I can't! This is ridiculous!
No, see, here's how that would actually go. But the net result is a highly expensive and highly silly series of scenarios where the playable characters face the worst things about themselves, their obliviousness, recklessness, their past trauma, and only one of them has to overcome it. But man, I've seen less heavy-handed business out of Persona. The quest wraps up with a happy ending, but it doesn't matter because I'm sure a tenth of the player base actually got here. Making the party hunt down the head of a corporation is a good idea. Making them regular Promethean citizens was a good idea. With a fat script edit and the original aesthetic, nobody would have batted an eye. If there's any lesson in New Tales, it's let's maybe not fetishize graphical fidelity and technological advancements if they add nothing. Games are made and then exist. This only looks bad now. So much Gearbox history informs the Borderlands games in the background. The development cycles of Duke Nukem Forever, Alien Colonial Marines, Battleborn, but I'm trying to keep the focus on Borderlands itself. With that said, part of why I continually dog on Randy and ignore the development history is Borderlands is kind of cursed. Gearbox apparently underpays employees compared to the market standard, and so when Borderlands 3 didn't overperform and simply overperformed, employees got stiffed on bonuses. What do you have to say about this, Randy? For my next trick, I'll make your bonuses disappear! Oh good. Guest character Claptrap.
Wait a minute! You're not dead! Yes!
So what do you think about...
Let's tear this planet a new soul!
But hold on, just one...
How did you know that stairs were my only weakness?
Can I interact
Next
at
to
all?
electrocution and explosions and gunfire, rust, corrosion.
Man, I should have saved Borderlands 3 for its own video essay. The emotional resonance of Borderlands 3. Not in a million years. Borderlands 3 is such a glorious experience from a mechanical perspective. You hop in for the first time, PC choking to death from the processing power necessary to run this thing, begging for release from the sheer girth of the file size, and the ambient occlusion is there, and the rays, the textures, and you start running around like a maniac, jumping and sliding, something entirely new to the series, desperate to pick up a gun while the nearby Claptrap does his stand-up routine until finally... Yeah! Oh yeah! A fully modern Borderlands game, a true AAA gold-juiced gun-shooting adventure.
Damn, these guys got a good graphic design department. Piss off! It's here!
Of course, then you gotta run the whole thing. All 30-some hours of it, and it's amazing for such a long stretch. Everyone I knew growing up played Borderlands. We've been waiting for this triumphant moment, that scrappy thing, becoming what we all thought it was. 4 deep, nuanced characters with interesting gameplay, and a whole additional way to play. A whole skill tree in the DLC. A long-winded, ass-pounding, vault-hunting, gun-shooting saga.
What is up, brothers and sisters? Got Queen Irene coming to you live. That could kill her. She knows.
Borderlands 3, like all Borderlands games, is not the story of the characters, but the people the plot revolves around. Tasked with replacing Handsome Jack, Gearbox fell into a hole on complete accident. They've been the subject of an absurd degree of criticism over, quote, poor writing by people unironically looking for quality writing from Gearbox, people who miss the thing how it was in the old days.
Jazz, stop! Oh my god, I'm so ticklish there.
Lady's got a gut full of dynamite and a booty like...
Which is a powder keg not really worth engaging with until later. For now, let's say Borderlands 3 is fine and see what's going on. Gone are the disparate psychos united under a single banner, the COV, the Children of the Vault, effectively a cult run by the Calypso twins. Do I have like 140-some thousand? Can I get a cult? Do they distribute cults? They spell the premise out, nice and clear. Nobody ever thought to weaponize Pandora's greatest resource. These guys. And that is an amazing premise. With a cult of maniacs scattered all over the world, we're thrown into persistent danger against a formidable opponent who isn't some corporate asshole, but a cultural Pandoran, even if their origins are a little muddier in truth. But Borderlands 3 is one of the most expensive games ever made, and it isn't satisfied with that single adventure framework. We've got to go off-planet, visiting all kinds of new locales, doing all the same gameplay, but in the game's defense. It's some really fun gameplay. And it's tapped directly into that spirit of generosity from the first, which I understand is an insane thing to say about a video game published by a corporation. It's a product on the market and products can't be generous. Sure, okay. But Borderlands was always about more, and choice, and new euphemisms for the M word, and those priorities drew me to the IP. 3 is easily the biggest game, with the greatest overall variance. Shoot, even the drop rate is jacked up, leaving the player with incredible new guns every time they sit down to play. It's a ride, and one I highly recommend, but that ambition starts to strain only partway through.
Shouty, you a full stack of waffle cakes.
You gotta pour some syrup on it.
Oh, Jesus. At its core, modern Borderlands is still itself. You run and gun, activate abilities, you can even slam down out of the air like the pre-sequel if you're feeling spicy. And the new sliding and jumping mechanics bring it all together, prioritizing player power by turning them into a seamless, combat-weaving death machine, able to transition from full fire to crouched-in cover in a blink. People say the same thing about Borderlands 3 every time. Awesome game, terrible story. And while we'll interrogate that, the first line gives away the game here. It is good. It is worth playing because it's flat out fun. Even the smooth, high frame rate sludge of new tales isn't present here. It's still Borderlands. Character models and animations are primitive for the era. They don't animate as ambitiously as many major AAA titles, and so they still feel janky, still smack of Borderlands. In fact, almost nothing about the IP has meaningfully changed. You still blast through collection quests, walk into bad gags, and suffer through horrible stand-up. Oh, this guy's name is Goner Maleges. What the f is that shit? You still get harassed via radio 24/7 and help insufferable dipshits and psychopaths with their problems. You still travel from kill room to kill room like it's a PS2 action game. Borderlands never left. It's been here all this time. That said, there's the question of length and complexity. While Diablo 3, for example, brought actual meaningful complexity to the series with full-blooded characters and unique build paths, it also did a funny thing where it jangled keys in front of your face every single solitary second of play, ensuring you were bedazzled until you were burnt out on dopamine. Damn, isn't it weird how so many gaming is dead videos exist? I wonder if modern gaming caused this somehow. It maliciously overloaded players, attempting to maximize playtime with no real regard for its consequences on narrative and the broader player base. Borderlands 3 is a loot fiesta, but it's always been a loot fiesta. This isn't new. What is new is the deluge of new faces, new places, and mechanical complexity, ensuring that playing Borderlands 3 for too long will very likely burn players out. Add to that the characters doing their best Jerry Seinfeld impression in your eardrum for incredible stretches of time, and it's not hard to see why people seem to be bouncing off the series lately. When things like this happen, when people sour on their favorite thing, they tend to rationalize. Oh, it's the writing, it's the story, it's the cringe. But I'm not sure that's accurate. I certainly felt some kind of way about all of those things across my playthroughs. Oh, go on. Tell me Tiny Tina was really, really funny. I dare you. Say Tiny Tina was funny. Now! I think Borderlands 3's real sin is its slavish devotion to the past. People think it changed too much, but let me tell you what Borderlands 3 actually is, played straight. A game where you move from outpost to outpost, collecting major and side quests, talking to familiar and new faces with absolutely endless dialogue. You hop into a mission, you start running, get into a kill room and take it down, get roadblocked by something plot relevant so a character can yap, just lay down the jackhammer until you've been sitting stock still for 1 to 3 real-life minutes and you can finally progress to another platforming segment or kill room, only for the individual you're dealing with to walk back on stage ad nauseum. Can somebody get the cane? To repeat my point, every Borderlands game from 2 and on is like this. This is just the longest one. I love humor in games. If anything, I think more games should try, because it isn't easy. But when the riffing and the sarcasm and the mealy-mouthed Joss Whedonism horse is blasting over your comms device 24/7, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Google searches for lobotomies spiked when this game launched. Someone modded out all of the dialogue from Borderlands 3. Here comes random fan with the chair! Games like Styx, Master of Shadows, at least kept it to a minimum, and the sequel made it a legitimate punishment, something the game inflicted you with upon death.
Did you stream that? I want a percentage on your best goblin death compilation.
Here, it's every goddamn second. This gameplay is incredible, so smooth, rewarding, snappy, stuffed to bursting with amazing guns, and you still feel compelled to get up and do the Borderlands shtick. Why? Who is making you? Is there a joke per minute quota? Will ontologically evil Randall Pitchford punch an employee for every line? that doesn't end with a rim shot? What is going on here? This excruciating Borderlands brand progression is a huge drag-on play that shouldn't even exist. Getting the overlong dialogue to fit in the box doesn't elevate the moment-to-moment play, and you'd think it'd be obvious. It sticks out like a sore thumb across all of these games, those specifically from 2 and on, but it's worst here. It got me to hate Vaughn. You gotta do a lot to make me hate bro. And so, when Borderlands 3, smart as it feels, puffed up with such an enormous budget, decides to send the player off Pandora and across the universe, it arrogantly assumes that visiting new planets is enough on its own. And it is a big addition. Getting to see more of this universe, finding out that, well, the world, the paradigm, the species itself is so fundamentally broken that everywhere is Pandora, more or less anyway, makes the thing work. This universe is congruent. It's not sapping what's special out of Pandora by presenting a quirky, insipid cast of intergalactic idiots. It's just spreading the Borderlands cheer, celebrating that everything sucks everywhere all the time. I feel that. I appreciate that kind of creative decision. And you're excited at first, walking into these uncharted territories, where Pandora is, as they say, mud, guns, and dirt. Promethea is so urban, and the Jacobs planet so bayou.
Got me a right problem with this witch lives down Bogway. Need you to go help her out with some chores and see if you can't find out what she's up to.
And Maya's little alcove planet so bright, colorful yet peaceful, almost Overwatch-like, it's almost enough, alongside the rock-solid mechanical experience, to carry play throughout the length of the game. But the stand-up returns, time after time after time, annoying dipshit after annoying dipshit. I think you could point out 1 to 5 characters you hate from every single planet because inevitably, someone, somewhere, from star to shining star is boring into your ear canal with the most cringe-inducing garbage iced tea. Shut up! There's definitely a vibe playing through Borderlands 3 of, who is this written for exactly? You can't really point to young people when they're pulling out Penn and Teller references. Who and huh? And on one hand, that's a great pull, a very modern American history thing. Randy's from a line of magicians, is into magicians. This is kind of cool. The way finding out that Boom Boom is basically a reference to Mad Max's Master Blaster is kind of cool. But again, who is this written for? It really is a shame. These spaces all have unique visual identities, not unlike Borderlands 2, but they're so modern, informed by years of a franchise refining itself over time. Promethea is awesome. The sheer verticality of these levels turns exploration, especially in an urban cityscape during a death game, into another kind of gameplay altogether, distinct from Pandora. That's nothing to slough off, by the way. Routinely across all of the levels, you're made to access some skill. Something flavors the play to give each area something different, even if it's only barely altering the core experience. Pandora is the same Pandora as always, just with a few more crates, plenty of driving and plenty of shooting. You visit a low-gravity zone that's got the same sort of pre-sequel vibe, which turns play into a lot of jumping and shooting, with unique platforming to boot. The monastery planet doesn't last long and doesn't do much to alter things, but it's got some of the most gorgeous arenas in the entire game, going for raw visual spectacle. I love the variants and what they did to preserve the integrity of every stop on the journey. All of this is awesome. Varied the play, comes with guns to match. No other Borderlands game can compete. Yeah, there's a conflict of interest here. Don't get me wrong. Picking up a legendary in Borderlands 3 is like picking up a ripe avocado from the store. You expected it, but you can't always find it. It's nothing legendary at all, not like the old days, where legendary loot could be so rare it almost wasn't worth grinding for. But the trade-off in having a tier of loot not really command the same respect anymore is a wildly enjoyable looting experience. Borderlands 3 is the only game where the original 87 bazillion guns bit feels real, even if it's still false. I had a rocket launcher that shot off miniature nukes. I had a shotgun that you shot, waited a sec, and it turned into a fireworks show of miniature explosions. I had a gun that when thrown, boomeranged around the room, firing bullets the entire time. And this could be chained together rapidly so that you could have 3 to 4 gunnerangs blazing bullets across the screen at any given time. And let me be clear here, that rules. And wow, does it suck for any allies you have. They're gonna get all the visual noise coupled with all the regular noise.
You ever think about how many people we've killed? How many lives we've snuffed out? Removing all hope for redemption? Condemning our victims to eternal judgment because of our petty whims and desire for loot and glory? Me neither, bitch!
Me neither. So right. She's so right. You can destroy people's eyeballs in Borderlands 3, especially if you pick Moze. Load her mech up with nukes and set him off in front of your melee character friend's face. You can physically harm your friends in Borderlands 3. This is the first game in the entire series that lets you inflict Borderlands on another player. This game is incredible. It doesn't stop at the guns either. Bosses actually have mechanics sometimes, or zip around the room and make your life difficult. Even in the pre-sequel, early players complained about getting obliterated by enemies in this weird, floaty system on console where they couldn't aim well. Borderlands 3 on PC is what the series was always supposed to be, challenging enemies dropping incredible loot. It took so long to realize the vision. Most of the Borderlands vision is wrapped up in character, so let's see what they were so confident about. Moze, Zane, Amara, and Flak, a gunner with a mech, an operative with cloning tech, the first Borderlands melee siren, and a beastmaster. Unlike boring pet classes of yore, Gage in particular, Flak actually has to use their pets with some level of mastery. They don't just fire and forget. And since the class makes use of snipers and other ranged weapons, you get a solid, self-sufficient ranger that really keys into the Pandoran Wastelander fantasy, being a tamer of beasts and scrounging for what you can, survival of the fittest, in a coat. Zane carries a similar vibe to the pre-sequel's Jack body double. He can spec hard into grenades, he can set a clone and teleport back to it. He has interesting builds and the tools to keep gunplay fresh, frenetic, and stylish as well, which is awesome for the game's more mobile, complexified brand. Amara is great because melee builds have pretty historically looked visually dull in the series. Yeah, Krieg was a hulking maniac, but he, and Zero as well, mostly mashed into enemies without big, flashy animations to compensate, making the style enjoyable to play, but incredibly boring to watch. Amara fixes that by making use of huge siren abilities, grabbing enemies a la phase lock, making shock waves, and her basic melee abilities make her look like a monk, weaving fists and guns, particularly close range guns, to maximum effect. Moze was my character, and purely because of the mech. She can run and gun unlike the rest of the cast, maintaining a kinetic modern flow to her regular play, and build up her mech however she likes, accessing missiles, chain guns, flamethrowers. It's more fun than it looks, and carries serious tanking utility, allowing players to instantly duck death by hopping in the mech and gaining a whole Iron Bear health bar. It also helps her res allies for free as she can't be properly downed, though the mech can be destroyed, but it's rare on regular difficulties. And again, you can absolutely obliterate your allies' eyes and ears, so all of these classes are, to me, the peak of Borderlands character design. Regardless of how interesting or varied you think your old favorite was, these ones have actual nuances, real build paths, and raw 60 FPS high-fidelity flash. They look and feel good to play. More than that, the DLCs offer additional play options via a 4th skill tree. And the game is built around these unique character builds, by the way. Class mods have always been a thing, since the very first game, but here they offer actual passive abilities instead of mere stat boosts and ability increases. Your Moze can stay in Iron Bear longer, and refund portions of the fuel as cooldown reduction, maximizing its use. Amara can deal 90% more damage up close, just insane. Game-warping passive skills. And guns are in on it too. Plenty of items, even shields, on that note, are anointed for Siren, Gunner, Beastmaster, etc., varying the loot hunt as you search for the perfect weapon for your perfect build, but also spiking your power randomly when you find a great gun that was tailor-made for what you're doing. It's so hard to understate how intentional the design is, how elegant and crafted the play experience is, here and mostly here alone. The others have their strengths, but talking raw play, Borderlands 3 does it better. And so it is with great chagrin I have to talk about Borderlands 3's story. Not because it's notably bad, but because everyone came pre-packing a lot of opinions about it. So let's have a look-see. What's going on? The first thing you'll hear about Borderlands 3 is how horrible this story is. Ask your friend, ask YouTube, it's always the same thing. People make really strong claims about stories, and usually without qualifying them. And fair enough. But I think I'll do my own research on this one. The villains are cringe. Let's see.
What is up, brothers and sisters? God Queen Tyreen coming to you live. We got something real special for you today.
Yep, but I think that might be a good thing. Sure, Tyreen and her brother are annoying. They're influencers, streamers, they call you superfan.
Hey, a superfan!
They're arrogant, and maybe they're, like, kind of, irritating, or whatever. But that's every Borderlands character. Jack only gets a pass because the actor happened to get a free pass to riff in the mic, and managed to sell it. He's 1 in a million. Can't be Jack forever. Shouldn't be Jack forever. I think they're fine. I like Tyreen's weird big head and Bro's bizarre proportions. He even needs her to live. They were conjoined twins, eventually severed, etc., etc. He looks insane. The first young, fresh, different-looking warlords we've gotten since the series' inception. What Tyreen and her brother do to earn players' ire is hurt beloved series characters. Early on, Tyreen sucks the siren powers right out of Lilith. You know, all 12 inches is siren. That's right, Lilith, who said, sup, and I don't know, was the Firehawk or something. Tyreen's real offense was outright killing Maya, a character people liked because she was pretty, a girl, and wasn't a streamer. A bunch of young people jerked off about it. This better not be a, my favorite waifu got killed, or I'll have a panic attack right here. I have no idea what the fuss was about. I've heard some pretty pointed complaining, but there's no rule you can't kill off an inactive character for an emotional pull. Lots of series do that. Borderlands did that. Some people just didn't like who the wheel landed on, but that also doesn't make the plot bad.
Wait, what? No way! It's Son from, oh my god! Holy shit!
I see. The villains acted like villains. How could Gearbox do this to us? Now, the complicating factor is Maya's apprentice, who whines at Lilith because of Maya's death, generally acts her age, which you'd expect. She's just a kid. And so, when she chews Lilith out, and when the assembled allies kind of slough off Maya's death with an awkward, let's move on already convo.
People die in wars. By the droves. I mean, open your eyes, people.
One that was originally going to be more well-rounded, but unfortunately was stripped back during development. Instead of all the cringy stand-up, players reacted real bad and proclaimed it the death of Borderlands, which is exactly as insane as it sounds to anyone not steeped in the series. Ava's not even particularly offensive, she's just annoying. Like the population of the entire game. I remember people saying Tiny Tina was an issue for Borderlands for very different reasons when she came out, and she was about the worst thing in 2 as far as annoying goes. Significantly more annoying than Ava. I don't remember people crying very much at all about Roland. Now, admittedly, Roland got a statue in Borderlands 3 to commemorate his sacrifice, got treated respectfully with the whole hear everybody's weird sad opinion about Roland's death in a series unequipped to handle actual emotional material. And so we're left with a plot that otherwise works, no more or less than the other games, but gets disproportional amounts of criticism for riling up some portion of the audience. Okay, so creative writing 101. An annoying character, or a hateable character, is not a bad character. Joffrey in Game of Thrones isn't a bad character because he evokes strong emotions. That kind of makes him a great character. Characters are not sacred cows, even when they're women, and weighing whether or not a death is meaningful should amount to, I didn't care for it, instead of, you know, this. The actual question is, what did it set out to do, how did it accomplish this, and does it work? So let's lay it out. Tyreen's existence and goals are good. She rallied the psychos into a cult army, seizing power like a Pandoran warlord would to achieve dominance. Yes, her means are kind of modern, and maybe that's an affront to someone, but this is also like a sci-fi series. She needs to be well established as a threat, so she knocks Lilith down a peg with a never-before-seen power, and even kills a beloved character to drive the point home. Stakes raised, threat established, clear-cut and unmistakable. I didn't sit there like, oh, I bet we could take her in a 1v1 like I did with Jack, because she's not just some dude, but an actual siren with a body count. She's annoying, but she's got her charms too. Like, consider how far of a cry Tyreen is from the first game with Commandant Steele, also a siren, which apparently many players don't know, even though she's got the same markings as Lilith, a character we never get to touch, who dies. And here we are facing an actual siren threat, someone who could kill any of us at any time. That's a good villain. She's annoying, but she's got her charms too. The greatest mistake they made was making her retread Jack exactly by giving the player a quest to kill themselves for a gun reward. Lame callback, but the gun calls you a boom when you fire it.
Super bitch!
I don't care who you are or how wrong you are. That is perfect. I will say the story can feel a little disjointed, hopping all over the planets, and it strains under the runtime, something none of the other games' relatively threadbare plots had to deal with because they were half as long. Some of the beats feel silly or extraneous. Tannis becoming a siren with machine control is fine, and people like Tannis. I don't know exactly why they did it, but sure, most of the planet hopping involves doing something for someone. Hammerlock, Reese, and finding vault key fragments, entering vaults, killing vault monsters, and gaining more Iridian powers like the ability to actually crush Iridium, decipher their language, etc. Doing the work someone called a Vault Hunter should. It's probably the only game to actually focus on vault hunting in particular, even though it's entirely secondary to the main goal of killing Tyreen, since Borderlands 1, by the way. This is the fourth mainline game. Finally, we're vault hunting, and that's intentional. Borderlands 3 is the first actual game about the universe, free from the stranglehold Jack had on everything, free from the budgetary constraints, dabbed with over a decade of franchise insight and development. It wants to solidify the story of the Borderlands, plural, so it loops the player into that legacy through echo logs left by Typhon de Leon, the first Vault Hunter, who ends up being a weird schlub who happened to have twins at one point. It's not a deeply emotional story, but nothing is functionally wrong with it, especially compared to older games. And the actual premise, the scope, the vision, makes it competent at the minimum. It's so insane that you have to go through the events piece by piece without an axe to grind to get even a mild, lukewarm read on the game because people are so incensed by who knows even. They feel compelled to put on the mask and get typing. That said, so many of Borderlands DLCs aren't worth the breath, and that sucks to say, but it's true. They're not interesting, deeply intelligent, or saying anything new most of the time. You're just not going to get a Borderlands DLC that meaningfully interrogates the way corporations defile everything they touch, and admittedly you don't need to. The series trots that particular point around in the background and sometimes in the foreground when it's feeling particularly saucy. No, what you get is Japanese westerns, okay? Old West coded, predominantly ethnically Japanese locations where the people call you Tomodachi.
Hold your fire, you baka bastards! Hey there, Tomodachi!
I don't ever want to hear baka bastards again. And sure, it's got weird gameplay shakeups like the stone that kills you and traitor weed, the weed that makes you traitor. What the fuck? And like jump platforms, and there may even be some extra lore about the Jacobs Corporation tucked in there amidst some cool new guns and solid character designs, but like all the rest, you blow in, do the tasks, and they need to do more stuff like this, seriously. You never remember the 30 kill rooms you blasted through to reach the ending. You remember the ideas, the visuals, and the moments that you didn't expect. Of course, we can't forget about Hammerlock's marriage to the head of the Jacobs Corporation. No need to interrogate that little factoid because he's rich and a real southern gentleman. And now cultists are here because we're in Cthulhu Place and Mancubus is saying words.
I am Mancubus Bloodtooth, host and proprietor of the lodge. Please, please enjoy your stay.
Oh, Mancubus, you'll be the last to die by my hand. How about Krieg's adventure where we enter his brain through science and shoot catapults at doors and really figure out what it means to be a psycho in this psychotic world. And hey, look at the time. Is this over yet? How it feels to play Borderlands 3 DLC. When does it stop? It's such a fascinating way to handle DLC. Go back to BioShock, all the way back to 2007, 8, 9, where a company produced some of the most thoughtful, interesting stories, not trope soup with a big, stupid more label slapped on. I only paid for these to record them for the video, but you get enough game out of the main game. I promise. And like always, there's an extraneous challenge mode that's actually a lot of fun with friends. The game successfully prioritized mechanics, so letting players go wild and push their mastery to the limit, especially on some of the higher difficulties, makes for a solid, if carpal tunnel-inducing challenge. Too long didn't watch, game's fun. Story's fine. But that's not nearly as fun as the unmitigated failure of Borderlands. Oh. Hey. I can't decide if I want my character to be chaotic, neurotic, or lawful, rofl. You think I can beg the DM to kill me?
We're playing bunkers and badasses, baby!
No. Please. Tiny Tina's Wonderlands is a whole lot to talk about. I am vibrating with motion. This is how it ends, isn't it? The first thing you've got to do is ignore all of that cynical clickbait horseshit mucking up your recommendations page, okay? Tiny Tina's Wonderlands is not that bad. It's a AAA spin-off game with good bones developed under what was probably the worst working conditions yet seen because, hey, they made an appeal to emotion in the credits and wow, they never end. I think a small country may have worked on this game. COVID screwed up a lot of dev cycles, and there's plenty of good here. Unfortunately, you'll never see it because chunking down any individual enemy takes about 2 to 3 times longer than any other Borderlands game and scene! Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. What? Huh? The premise of this Borderlands spin-off is at once fresh and entirely stale. You're a squad of 3 jerk-offs whose ship is grounded and with nothing else to do, you're made to play bunkers and badasses with Tiny Tina. See, they're all willing participants here, but this is basically a jigsaw trap. But the twist is, it's only that for the player. Your 2 friends, Valentine and Fred, along with Tiny Tina, will relentlessly inflict dialogue on you until you're ready to die. I don't totally hate that, but Borderlands 3 did that. Poorly. Thankfully, BoJack Horseman is here. Why would you flick away the one good thing? D&D starts with character creation, so let's make an OC. Yeah, that's a chaotic, chunky berserker if I ever saw one.
Revive peasant-ass peasant.
Thank you for saving my peasant ass.
Wonderlands asks players, for the first time in the series, to engage with a character creator and to select a class. 2 classes even, 1 main and 1 secondary. This doesn't need a deeper analysis, it's pulled directly from D&D, something the developers have been openly interested in for years, but it's interesting to finally see what a Borderlands character editor looks like. I mean, these characters are disgusting. Maybe a handful are worth ogling, like Ellie and Scooter. So while I don't dislike my lawful waffles chimichanganeer or whatever bullshit they wrote in the class selection box, I gotta tell you, little bit weird. You're plunked into the world, and what a world it is. I've been impressed with Borderlands aesthetics for many different reasons across every entry, mostly for the punk vibe and blazing colors, but I love fantasy. I love it to death. And Tiny Tina's Wonderlands has some of the strongest, most jaw-dropping visual work in any Borderlands game. No, it wouldn't fit the series to use all the time, but I'm glad I got to see what else they were capable of. I mean, I was excited to play this game. Hell yeah, let's pick up the spin to win class and kill stuff. Berserker, right? Like spin to win, go burr. But issues cropped up pretty fast, enough that, by the end, it was a crawl to the finish. The big theme of this story is repetition. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Wonderlands was dragged up and down the internet for a million uncharitable reasons by totally normal people who definitely didn't have an axe to grind or a culture war to wage. But unfortunately, some of the criticism stuck. People call Borderlands painfully unfunny and stupid, especially from 3 and on. So Wonderlands got targeted as a cringy embarrassment, which isn't exactly fair. You could say the same about most of the series, depending on your specific brand of humor. It's not a useful criticism. Wonderlands does do something very, very unfortunate, though, by exacerbating the Borderlands 3 problem with a panel of recurring voices.
So on top of sounding super evil,
Borderlands 3 is some of the most insufferable dialogue I've ever sat through in a video game. Mostly because it's that brand of playing at hip but hopelessly dorky stuff, like,
Vault Hunter, Crimson, holy crap, yes! How many troops did you bring? 20,000? 50,000?
Like I said, mealy-mouthed Joss Whedon quirk. But mercifully, in those older games, it's temporary. Some characters are blunt, some are psychotic, some are lol random, and some are dorks. Fine. By the time New Tales rolls around, everyone, and I do mean everyone, will use the term slash at some point during conversation, like this.
I need you looking sharp while defending me from my legions of fan/stalkers.
What if every character did that? What if every character was claptrap? Vaughn and Reese have transcended their original well-received appearance and suck up plenty of airtime to deliver the limpest awkward guy stand-up routines I've ever been strapped to my seat and forced to listen to, but at least their quests end within hours. You are stuck with tiny Tina and these two other idiots for so long. Will Arnett, BoJack Horseman, the bad guy, occasionally pops in to say something snarky about Tina, and it's the best part of the game, because it's a reprieve every time!
She wants you to think you're special, unique, one of a kind. Do you even have a name, Fatemaker? Has anyone ever said it? Has she? Yeah. Didn't think so.
The characters make you want to die. Dragon Lord tells Tina to die. I clap every time! But for the rest of the game, you're stuck with these guys.
I think it's obvious. We seduce the drawbridge.
Hey, why don't you seduce a knife and make it insert itself into your rectum? Of course, this issue is bigger than dialogue. It's even in the references. At one point, they try to do a Lamau the Witcher is so serious. He's such a douche. Lamau the Witcher, am I right?
That was terrible. You definitely summoned the Guardians within, who will definitely kill you. Nice one. If by some miracle you survive...
And we get this insane, total misrepresentation, which, yeah, might function as like a juvenalian criticism or like a really unfunny, inaccurate joke. But people like when the humor is real, okay? Just point out how this guy wrote himself a sterile, handsome warrior protag that everyone wants to So, yeah, the dialogue isn't meaningfully different from what's going on in 3, which isn't meaningfully different from what's going on in 2. It's just that you're getting hit with repeat cringeomancy tri-beams from the combined unholy trinity of Valentine, Tina, and Fred. Most of the other jokes are limp too. Yeah, okay, fair enough. But when you're actually trying to litigate Borderlands comedy, I mean, that ship has sailed, bro. So let's look at the other bits. The basic structure of Wonderlands is unique among the Borderlands games. First, because it's a spin-off, and second, because they couldn't get away with this stuff anywhere else. Play starts from the world map. Yeah, for all the beauty of the contained zones, they aren't in any way contiguous. This is not a world, it's an abstracted tabletop game you delve into pockets of during story progress. Major story mission areas exist, but plenty of combat is contained in random encounters. You'll be walking along, minding your own, and some ruffians will appear from the grass and start a battle. Thankfully, they're avoidable, but not always, so... You'll then be made to batter down waves of enemies until a bar is full, open some treasure, and continue. These aren't a problem, but they do add up, making frequent, contained battles part of game flow. Because you're not just filling up that bar, okay? You're going from wave to wave, filling up that bar. This is a process. Combat, something so profoundly integral to Borderlands and the effective bedrock of fun, starts to get old. And it really gets old because enemies just don't work how they used to. Combat doesn't work how it used to. I need to stop for a minute to be clear here. Wonderland's combat isn't rough because it's just too complex. Wonderland's combat is having to slowly sand down an ice cube instead of taking a big mallet and... Wonderlands is a mechanical paradigm shift for the series' signature combat. Regardless of the setting, you still load up and shoot goons, but because of various additions, certain elements of play were weighed differently. Every character has a melee attack, like any other game, but you equip melee weapons now. So every class is tapping into the same pool of items to upgrade a basic combat utility. This doesn't actually warp play for most characters, but it's worth putting a pin in for now. Every character has multiple action skills, but you can only equip one to start and a second later on, once you properly unlock your chosen subclass. This expanded utility has to be accounted for. Grenades are gone, replaced with spells. And there are a lot of spells with wildly different effects, though most of them are basically click, magic damage happens if we're being honest. Some of these are game warping. This meteor ability hits in a huge area and can effectively control groups. I had a flamethrower at one point that could help push damage into enemies as I waded into melee combat. These spells are also on cooldown instead of being restricted to consumable status, so they're integral to regular play. This expanded utility has to be accounted for. Enemies are still unique and varied, like any of the post-original Borderlands games, but because players have access to so many more tools, at least compared to earlier games, we have to assume the devs wanted to weight some of that power imbalance towards the enemies, made sure they didn't die too quickly, and so, Wonderlands Combat, the slowest, most knockdown, drag-out shit I've played through in the entire series. After a few hours, it's nothing short of draining. Despite the frenetic, choppy nature of the first game, there's a real kinetic verve to its... And you just don't get that here. Enemies are mostly creatures, not humans, so you almost never get those flashy, gory headshots. You can ping a goblin in the head 10 times, and the best you'll get is a floppy ragdoll animation. Basically, enemies turn into big lumbering health sacks and play, while fun enough for a time, slows to a crawl as combat drags on, enemies fail to die in satisfying ways, and you're made to tap into every option to pull through. There's some good in that kind of design, the way Diablo 3 made characters significantly more nuanced than in 2, but it's easy enough to compare with Borderlands 3, a game where you feel incredibly powerful almost all of the time, and it works. With so many mobility options, with powerful builds from years of consideration, incredible guns, that game and its runtime feel justified. Wonderlands just feels slow. Borderlands 3 had the loot. You gotta have the loot. They jacked that rate so high, man. I had legendaries on legendaries. I was selling them throughout the game. Wonderlands, I think I saw maybe 2 or 3 over the full run, and those guns stuck. Carried for good long lengths of time, making combat swifter and more bearable, but it just wasn't hitting like 3. It's hard to say if guns were nerfed, enemies' health was inflated, or the drop rate was intentionally lowered. I don't have the data, but I know how it felt to play, and that sickly combination is poison for this series. Even when you have so many different actions at any given point. You know, it's pretty rough when playing Mordecai back in 1 with a big ol' revolver and completely ignoring his class ability produces more enjoyable play than your new big-budget spectacle shooter with so many moves. From characters to world construction to the foundations of its combat, everything about Wonderlands undermines its flair. And that's the absolute death of the loot game, isn't it? Once the shine fades, what's left? Junk? It's just a fascinating experience because we've seen this before. It was the most popular DLC of Borderlands 2, so much so it's got its own wiki entry. There are major Japanese game devs without wiki entries. And yeah, that was a huge success. Everybody liked it. Allegedly, Gearbox has been meaning to handle fantasy material forever and had been rejected by various publishers. But it just feeds into the idea that this series is old. It's like if that DLC got its own full game, and they got around to making it a decade later. I mean, what is it about Tiny Tina that sticks with people? Is it just that she says horrendous, truly cringy things? Because that's an important point. If someone says something to you so striking, so absurd that, you know, it bores itself into your brain, at some point, even people like me have to acknowledge that maybe there's some good in that. I'm just saying this is the girl who said booty like pow, and we're stuck with this. Okay, all of that said, Wonderlands introducing RPG cruft into Borderlands is cool and makes sense. Picking a class is really just about the same as picking a character, only it's Borderlands, so every class needs to use guns. Somehow. Getting a melee class that feels legitimately good isn't new. Amara made it work, and plenty of Zero and Krieg truthers exist as well, but the thing can actually get in, deal damage, spread cold, slowing everything he comes into contact with, helping your ranged allies, and shattering enemies who freeze over. It's perfect! It's so smart! In theory! And aside from developer interest, you can see why this would work. D&D is about getting treasure from chests after taking down big monsters. This makes sense. Heroic fantasy and Borderlands are basically conceptually intertwined. In another world where combat were less of a slog for this game, I'd probably be its #1 throat goat. But here we are. Stab-omancer? That's so funny. Many classes have powerful utility options like the Clawbringer's Hammer Toss that creates a bubble shield. Various classes have companions that can soak up enemy attention. They feel very well considered, especially in a series that struggled for years to create consistently strong and interesting abilities that could carry through full playthroughs without making you want to hoop your neck for picking Roland, for example. These characters are good, and getting the chance to mix and match them however you like is huge. Allowing players to walk into a Borderlands game as a truly original creation is such kingly generosity in a way that the series hasn't really been since the original game, at least in my eyes. 2 and pre-sequel had add-on characters, but those were DLC. Even the lauded third game only has 4 playable characters, even if they're really good. It's such a treasure trove of a concept. There are drawbacks, though. It's a hard sell to make a casual player pick 2 classes, but fair enough. They pulled through picking their Animal Crossing island layout. Why not 2 classes? Except now we're playing D&D. Now the characters are actually complex, more so than the older games anyway, and you've got so much gear to optimize. It's slightly more complex, not overly challenging, but since you're dual classing, many characters tap into many of the same equipment pools. 3 is more depthy too, but here we're dealing with melee weapons and dual classing, multiple skill trees to tap into. It's a solid recipe for the people who love min-maxing and really digging into their character. Is something very true to some subset of Dungeons & Dragons players too, though I'm not sure it's the casual geek crew who, oh my god, Doctor Who Magic the Gathering crossover? Collect Funko Pops and who you're targeting with your writing.
Brett, it says your starter sword does murder 1,000 damage?
Murder 1,000. That's a lot. And it creates this menu swamp I want nothing to do with. And speaking of swamps I want nothing to do with, the story of Wonderlands is pretty rocky because it's something we've effectively already seen stretched out over significantly more hours. Tiny Tina has problems and we gotta work through them. With a therapeutic D&D session where we grow, change, learn to be better towards our friends. Mercifully, this has less to do with Roland and more to do with her own weaknesses as a human. Tina's such an interesting character. I lied. She really isn't. This is a 14-year-old girl who pervs on Mad Moxie, acts like a petulant child despite having had to grow up much faster than many people her age, and who talks like a really, really bad relic from 2011.
That's what she snuggle bites badonka-donk. She's my main squeeze. Lady's got a gut full of dynamite and a booty like, how?
Get me out! At the same time, I love this really stupid thing about the old Tina DLC and Wonderlands. Tina's a native Pandoran, so of course she's used to guns and vending machines, and even having guns in her setting, something that's questioned in the old Dragon Keep add-on. And so the worlds of these games are just Borderlands with a fantasy coat of paint. Nothing more, nothing less. And that's not even really brilliant, it's just kind of a passive necessity, but it ends up working out. It even bespeaks her age. She didn't include the weapons corpse or make up her own, she just renamed the extant ones so Jacobs becomes black powder with the same mechanics of that brand of weaponry. And again, not brilliant, but man, she's trying so hard to make fantasy out of everything she knows. Though it is kind of weird that she wants people to actually roleplay, engage with her setting instead of casually murder hoboing through it. You know, how she would. Anyway, Tina's a bad DM who jerks people around, invents things on the fly in a way that breaks any sort of verisimilitude, and who aggressively folds to player expectations after failing to ramrod her own ideas into the spotlight. Example, she props up a character as cool or interesting. The party immediately suspects the character of being evil, so she's evil now, and dead. And this isn't actually all that awful. DMing is hard work, and you can appreciate the psychological aspect of a young DM coming to terms with their players over the course of a campaign, learning together. D&D is, after all, a game you play with friends, a collective storytelling experience with combat mechanics tacked on. Even as far as Borderlands stories go, there's more direct intention here than some of the other games. The only real issue is the same issue we keep dragging out of the muck because it's all that's holding these games back, but critically, what's pinning them together. If there's any real bent to the stories that makes people dislike them from 3 and on, it's the more precious sort of delivery. The fact that these characters are together and they're going to listen to Tiny Tina's emotional problems because she's just a regular 14-year-old girl too. And it's fine, but this is the series that was wrapped up in Handsome Jack in 2012 dirtbag Xbox 360 suburbanite shit. Of course, that audience isn't going to dig this. Like, what the fuck? I'm being harsher than I want to, but I want people to know I can forgive cringe or whatever. I am cringe. I breathe cringe regularly, but I also want those who choose cringe to lean all the way into it. And that's something you can say Tiny Tina's Wonderlands does pretty effectively. Straight up nat 20, critical damage to my brain. And my only real complaint here, like play issue, is something I picked up on after running the other games. It's just a slog, simply put. My co-op partner and I were dragging our heels through these fights because Tina's is either balanced such that you need good gear in every slot and a solid build, or in expectation of the player having finished many side quests in advance, which was hardly an issue over the course of the other games. If you want to dive in head first, you might find it just as playable as any of the other games. It's still Borderlands.
I'm still alive, aren't I?
The truth about these games is Borderlands got old. The series was dust on the wind from its inception, this weird splash of color in an ocean of gray, a splash that expanded far enough to paint the seas. Borderlands is AAA gaming now. It was born at the turning point in the industry when games were made to offer more hours, more content, and more open palms until, with enough representation and manufactured consent, it became a juggernaut, an absolute bastion of loot grinding, downloadable content so bloated it could only bend beneath the load. Borderlands got old. It wasn't the fresh kid anymore, not with that $40 haircut and those spinning rims. And not every player came along for the ride. Borderlands got old, but so did its jokes. You can tell a joke 5 times, but you're an idiot if you aren't covering your head by the 4th. You can make them laugh, and you should. But when you force it, when you sprinkle it in every conversation, every passing remark, every nod on the street, it becomes a language. And most language passed between most people is nothing if not utilitarian. There is no joy, surprise, or novelty in utility. Borderlands got old and there was really no other way. When you're fed to the PR people and the marketing department and anyone else whose job is hitting quotas, when you feel compelled to maximize every facet of yourself, you can only ever end up sterile, marketable, lame. And maybe the concept was already old. It's a game based on loot farming. The picosecond that stops being enjoyable, you're done. It's really easy to get tired of looters the way it's easy to get tired of buying small things, trading card packs, new hobby gear, stuff for passing happiness. It can't last. It's doomed to get old by design, a bottomless hole. Once the dopamine receptors are dulled by the sheer utility of it all, what's left? Threadbare stories and paper-thin characters? The same jokes you already heard? People started falling off after 2. That huge popular game everyone was playing with tons of support. Borderlands didn't get bad in pre-sequel or 3. They're fun games, better mechanically, played straight. But even the fans got old. New generations of players enjoyed 3 and Wonderlands, people who never touched the first, or 2 even. So now modern Borderlands is financially successful regardless of all the anti-modern Gearbox community content. More than Borderlands, players got old. They left college, they lost all that free time, and things got harder. Life didn't seem so great anymore. Obligations and responsibilities and goals ate away at them, and maybe they started looking at the world a little differently. I mean, I did. I was a horribly negative person after high school, and got worse through my 20s. I didn't reclaim any kind of earnest joy in life until 30. There's this awful point in life when you're not totally settled, when you feel kind of trapped and start losing faith in everything, when the walls start closing in, when you can't know what you're doing next year or don't know where your rent is coming from. No one is coming to save you. You get old. You get tired. You get cynical. And suddenly everything is bad now when in reality, the conditions were perfect for you to actually enjoy something previously. The story of my entire 20s. I'm only telling you this because it's not your fault. I got old too before, and sometimes you have to take the world in your hand and turn it to see with younger eyes. One must imagine oneself ready for Special thanks to Marcules for helping carry through Borderlands 1 and part of the way through Borderlands 2, Jorzy Burden for being around throughout most of Borderlands 2's DLCs, additional assistance from various members of the Discord, and ultra special thanks, because they make that apparently, to Maury Brooks, at Maury Today on Twitter, who barely uses it except to retweet stuff. Thanks so much, everyone.
Hey, it's KBash. Huge thanks goes out to my $4 patrons. Check them out. Beautiful. And double special thanks goes to my extra generous patrons who are Adam Welch,
Acropolion, all the singularities,
Alpha 42,
Andrew,
Redacted, Anthony,
Arshwasser,
Azrael,
Azura,
Aaron,
Axin8,
Bear Skeleton,
Basement Dweller,
Bosch 7,
Ben M,
Beguile,
Big Papa Spray,
Bing Bing Doodoo Oingo Boingo Time, Lake Against the Machine,
Wargle Hargle, Blossom Dante,
Bohop,
Boom Dead,
BH Operator,
Born in Shadow,
Brandon S,
Brendan Hesse,
British Gooch,
Cow,
Cake Czar, Can I Cuss on Here?
C-Dub,
Catgirls Are Real,
Caesar T,
Chiefy Boy,
Hero Hero,
Cordit,
Chris Bromo,
Cody Golden,
Comfy Moogle,
Cookie Bug, Couch Moba,
Crashgers,
Crater,
Crispy J,
Mono 19D,
CW Glassworks,
Denny Pangos,
Danky Steak, Swaggy
David
Bat,
Castillo,
Dara,
Dash Granny,
Decode,
Deadward,
Dead,
The Strega,
Dingus Bat,
Doodle Flu,
Doug Prince,
DJ, Professor K,
Dr.
Cullen PhD,
The Protagonist,
Elias,
Elpio,
Elsa,
Emperor Pickle,
Empty Tenshi,
Excalibur Shines,
Nar,
Fail Knight,
Fuzillion,
Forte Noir,
Fupa Saiyan,
Frog Vorbis,
Garen Guaranteed,
Gato Nero,
Gigglebite,
Glyph Seeker,
Nine Cat,
Gobo Bobo,
Goose 6112,
Gray, the Darkest Black,
Garcory, Gucci Plant, Hatsune Miku's Crack House,
Archive,
Heeman, Game and Station,
Hermit J,
Hi, Pixie,
Honey Mutt,
Horn Tiger,
How do you know?
Huey,
I just took 7 grams of magic mushrooms and now I'm lost in the woods!
I'm supporting KBash just because I wanted to make this part of the video longer.
Inferno Galore,
Ingenious Cloud,
IOBG,
I punched a sandwich.
It's not bad.
It's time to sue.
It's not good.
Ivy Ruth Langley,
Jack Hydrick,
Jacob, James, Jason Lasky,
Jaden,
Jay Drito,
JL Savarus,
Jay Deus, JK Hedgehog,
John
Bo the Joker, Jordan Joyner,
Jorzy Burden,
Juicy Frost,
Julian My Julian,
June, Kaizetta Slow,
KBash's Best K,
Keegan Too Cool,
Keith the Thief,
Kata Snap,
King Kuma,
Keith,
Knight Pike,
Quack,
K-Noe,
Cone 2020,
Kraden,
Crazy Dark Chocolate, Ice,
Kyle,
Not that Kyle,
KZ Excellent,
Lady Weeb, Laundry Mom, Lego Sid, Lethal Nibbles,
Linkle,
Little Big Trouble,
Loathsome Dung Eater,
Low Fat Mogert, Lucas Boy, Blood Mac James,
Lunati,
Magic Meows,
Mama Rollin,
Manapool, Manic Pixie Space Pirate,
Mara Ganger,
Marcules,
Marcus Rambles,
Maximum Dome,
Maple Puppet,
Mega Boy E Nasty, Metal Gear Gaseous,
Michelle Citrano,
Mike DeVere,
Mikusagi,
Miss Miasma,
Moa,
Bobby Dobby, Big Titty Gop GF Cooley, Monochrome Only, Monochrome Rainbow,
Morgana Black,
Modi, Mr. Yeety Dabface McYoink Bomb, Nyrenew, Vito Torpedo, Neon Dwarf,
Nifty Rex,
Not Nobel, Nuggy, Old Burgle, Old Man Cranberry, Omni Nerd Zero, Only LK, Kaplant, PBK,
Pandemic Cowboy,
Pelagic Undulation, PK Gaming,
Mike,
Popular Hitman, Prismatic Dan,
Pringle Prongle, Pringle Prongle,
Probably Not Grady, Project Darklight,
Punch Fighter Champion,
Ponosaurus Rex, Quasar McDougal, Quillworth,
Raging Ataraxia,
Real Beans, Reggie Rodriguez,
Renteca Bond,
Ringed Relay,
Roy Londo,
RP Gamer,
Ryan Machel,
Ryan Maury Brooks,
Saigon Man,
Salsa, Salty Smasher, Scribe Slendy, Sakai no Award, Sensual Coder,
Saphirium,
Sexy Bionicle GF,
Shy,
Nintendo, Shut Up Wesley, Silver Bear 909,
Sin,
God!
Sir Doodles Alive,
Sir Newton,
Sir Slurps Alive,
Skyward Lead, Sleepy Wabbit, Snart, Small Turtle House,
Zeta Dad,
Sock'em Bopper,
Suckdolager,
Space Lizard,
Spider Dad,
Squidged, Squishword, Star Night Sky, Storm Strider and the House of Storm,
Streffin Battles, Super Dingus,
Super Sandwich Guy,
Taya Toxin,
Jordan Chubbington, Terrence Swift, The Big Bubby, The Clown Prince of Cringe, The Digital Dutchman, The Good Lord has blessed me, hallelujah, The Green Loki,
The Crispy Boy,
The Peacemaker Pyro, The Salt Knight,
The Nomad,
The Real McCoy, Big Dick Mystic,
Thresh,
Rips Heart,
Tiggles McGuffin,
Tim Lobster, Timid the Writer,
Tony Jones, The Legend,
Total Play, Travis Edwards, Twiddle Chungus, Ty Guy 9001, Type A Grapefruit, Vid, Vacant Plaza, Valenris, Venom, Vice Plot, Vic, Joaquin Get Bright in My Bag, Posa, We Are So KBash, Weed Trash, Waylon, Where Am I Help? Widgie, Winter Solstice, Wood TV, Wrenchim, Zanny Tanner, Travius,
Your Boy Flyers,
Yero 12, Yashichi, Yay Kundo, Your Mom, Winky Zachary Livesey, Zachary Zanasso, Zane the Impure, Zane the Pure, Zed Slayer Gamer, Zero Zalazar, Sylvan Ray, Nova, Cyberbunk,
If you'd like to help support the show, unlock new long-form projects, and help me keep improving, check out my Patreon. We got lots more videos in store. Stay tuned for more. KBash out.